Okay, thank you. So let's call Orono Town Council Committee's meeting to order for Monday, October 2nd. Roll call shows that all councilors are present. We're going to start this evening with the Community Development Committee. Your Councilor Mayor.
Thank you, Chair Wingard. So tonight I want to first thank staff for putting together a really comprehensive memo on where our election process has been, where we've been at. We've invited the school board to be here with us tonight. Superintendent Higgins is with us. Thank you. And we've invited some students from the University of Maine to join us. And I was wondering if we could introduce ourselves quickly, just so we know where you are.
I'm Max McDonough. I live on Pine Street.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. My name is Tristan Friends. I am a member of the Student Senate, Vice President for the Maine Democrats, and these are my colleagues.
Hi, I'm Lucas Cousins. I'm a freshman at UMaine, and I'm also College Democrats, and I'm running for Student Senate.
Hi, I'm Maeve Durkee. I'm also a freshman and I'm also a member of the Maine Democrats.
Really glad you joined us. And of course, you too, Meredith, but happy to have everybody here and talk about this together. I was hopeful, I was thinking, happy to get other suggestions, but we've got some time to talk about this. I was hopeful we could maybe make some observations about what was shared with us in terms of the briefing document, and then talk about maybe what our objectives are in terms of what we think, and then see if we can't coalesce around some steps forward, if that makes sense to people. And happy to have someone, I prefer not to go first, but or have somebody jump in with any observations about what we learned, where we are in terms of this process.
I'll start. I did, the election data was shared for, I don't know, since after the last meeting. From what dates to what dates for the last 10 years or something, right? Roughly?
Yeah, goes back to 1998, 25 years.
And I spoke previously that I'm not in favor of doing this. I don't know if we're not having that discussion, I guess, but and I think that data for me illustrates the why, because looking at 2020 data, we had 550 people vote in the municipal election. We had 5,300 vote in our national election. And there was nothing stopping those 5,000 people that didn't vote in March from voting in March. It was a 30-day window people could vote. So what I think we end up with is basically somewhat of an arbitrary outcome from our local elections. If we have 5,000 people compared to 550 people that are engaged in the process and vote, if we have 5,000 people that aren't engaged and are filling in a blank, I think we end up with an arbitrary outcome. And I think that's problematic for local elections. So was anyone else, was anyone else concerned with that data, or maybe just look at it completely different than I do?
When I read that data, I'm reading that people pay more attention, obviously, to the national stuff. Perhaps this would put local stuff on a wider range of people's radar in order for us to get actually a wider swath of people. What I see in that data is really low voter turnout for municipal elections. Only a really small core of regular people, around 500, are voting each March election. In the past several, we've had close to 700 or something, but regardless, out of 11,000 registered voters in a town, that's a really small number of people participating in this process. So I see it as a way of sort of putting this at the same level of sort of attention, potentially, if we put it in November as the other ones. It would require more outreach on the part of municipal candidates to make sure that people are paying attention to what's happening here. I don't think what you're calling attention to is totally wrong, but
Yeah, I think that you've got to do some mental gymnastics to suggest that by people showing up for the national election, now they're engaged with our local. You can do political gymnastics, I guess, but I think I don't think that's very sincere.
I guess I can speak to my own perspective as somebody who moved to town as a student to start graduate school and was motivated to vote in our national elections because I knew what was going on at that scale. And it took some added work for me to figure, I was willing to get educated and get engaged with what was going on locally, clearly, eventually. But I was trained to look for and think about the fact that there would be an election in November, and was the kind of person who believes in doing my research and sort of voting in general. And so if even as a new student who had landed in a new place, I knew there was an election coming up in November, because that's when elections are, I would have looked at what was on the ballot and taken the time to research what who was running for council and school board, and kind of made that part of the practice. But I actually can't remember if I voted the first couple elections that I lived in Orono, not because I don't believe in voting, but because it didn't occur to me that there might be a municipal election in March that would be a thing that I could do. And so I think there's a lot of value to working within sort of a framework that allows the habit of voting to be transferable to people arriving in a new place. And I mean, I think if somebody doesn't do their research on the candidates, they can just leave that blank. But I think there's a lot of value to increasing voter turnout generally. I also wanted to kind of respond to your initial prompt, which was, can someone summarize the issue a little bit? So I could, I guess, take it upon myself to do that. The issue is we're thinking of switching the timing of our municipal election, which has historically been in March. And this would require a change of our Orono charter to do. And so it would be a multi-step process. So I'm glad there are people here already to talk about it, but this is kind of one step in a longer process. And the process would look like this. After tonight's kind of committee meeting, so an informal opportunity to get some input and chat about it, it would go to a regular town council meeting for formal consideration. And then we would set a date for a public hearing on a proposed town charter amendment. So that would be theoretically, we'd have a timeline that middle of this month, we'd talk about it at the town council meeting, set a date for a public hearing, which would be in the middle of November. And so that would be a great opportunity for more public input on this matter before it would then in December go for formal consideration for calling a referendum election. And then the people of Orono would actually get the opportunity to vote on whether they wanted to do this charter change and shift the timing of our election via people's referendum. So there's a lot of opportunity for not just us to make a decision here, but for us to be engaging and sort of launching into a process that could allow the people to decide what they want to do on this. And one question that came up was, well, what do we do about the fact that those of us already sitting on the town council, if we shifted the date of the election, does that mean we'd be serving shorter terms or serving longer terms until theoretically the date of the election would change? And what we heard back from the lawyer is that, and I had a question about this actually, is that their recommendation was for us to serve longer terms. So if we were elected for like a 3-year term, we might therefore be serving some, 3 years and whatever months until that election at which we could be up for replacement or re-election. But I'm curious to learn a little bit more about what the guidance there was.
Great.
Have I summarized the issue adequately? Probably more than adequately.
No, so I apologize for not summarizing it. You missed the lesson. You get into the weeds on the stuff. You think everyone who's here knows what we're talking about. So apologies for not watching. Knows what we're talking about. I think that was a great summary.
Great.
So
I had a question. Do we know our neighboring towns when they hold their municipal elections? Do we know when Old Town and Brewer and Bangor and others hold theirs?
I think I reached out to several of them and they hold theirs in November. So, and I've got data here from a couple of different communities on what their blanks are, because I know we talked about that before, and people who don't know what the council races are about. So in in November of, and I'll pass this around, I've printed off enough for several of us, or in November 8th of 2022 is a general election. There were, 4,266 votes for Paula Page, 7,714 votes for Janet Mills in Bangor. And Sam Hunkler got 250 votes. And you go down to the ballot and you go down to the city council races where there are three, I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 candidates running for, I think 3 seats. And there were 11,230 blank ballots. So people were choosing not to vote in those, sometimes that's strategic, where someone's like, I really like Donald William McCann, so I'm gonna go vote for Don, and I'm not gonna vote for any other candidates. So there's some of that there, you can't dismiss that, but then there are other, you could read into the data that some of those voters didn't know who the candidates were and just chose not to participate in the election, down ballot.
How many voters, how many blank you said?
Yeah.
11,230, so blank would have won the first 2. Got more than the first and second.
Thanks for bringing this data. This is great.
And I got data from Old Town, Ellsworth, same experience. People are not, they're leaving, they're blank. There are a lot of blank in the November elections where there's a general election, a presidential, a gubernatorial, go down the ballot, and there are a lot of blank votes in those races. So people who don't know, they can't, again, some of it's strategic, and you'll never know because you can't ask the voter, but some of that strategic, leaving the other ballots blank because you have one strong preference. But a lot of that would get anticipated are people choosing not to cast a ballot for candidates they don't know.
So the 11,000 across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seats, is that right? So
Yeah.
that changes the math a bit, obviously, because it looks like they have about 11,000 voters roughly. If you think that everyone voted in the governor race, it's about 11,000.
Yeah. Yep.
Someone
11,
could have left one.
about 12,000. So in
12,000.
voted for governor.
Okay.
And then, and you go down,
Yeah.
so you could have voted for 3 of these 5 candidates, and so there could have been 36,000 votes in the council races, and I think that's how the math kind of adds up. But the city clerk in Bangor did caution me, you can't read those as people, some of that is strategic voting, some of it's just people not choosing to participate in those elections.
Yeah.
And the same in Old Town, what's interesting about Old Town is I know, one of the concerns are, what happens if we have, this is not my concern, but I know this is a concern that's been voiced, is what happens if we have, students deciding that they're gonna, take over the town council by just the sheer of their numbers. And I looked at it, and a guy named Zach Wiles, who I worked with when I was at the university, he grew up in Old Town, was a student body president and graduated in 2022. He ran for town council in Old Town and he didn't win. He came in 3rd of 3 candidates last year. And not to say anything about Zach, he's a really good guy, and I love that he's running for office, and I hope that he gets elected, gets a chance to serve in Old Town if that's what he wants to do. But it's just interesting to see that, if anyone would have been positioned to ride a wave of student voters, and there's a lot of students who live in Old Town, into elected office, Zach would have had a lot of the advantages. And so,
That said, Old Town doesn't hold their elections on campus, right?
no, they
So
don't.
that's a
Yeah.
little bit of a difference maker, obviously, as well.
Yeah.
You can tip over to the field house and go versus going to Old Town.
No, I agree. Yeah. Any other, I'd love to, if anyone else have any observations first, I'd like to recognize our friends and colleagues at the school board.
Yeah, curious what the school board folks are thinking about this.
So hi, I'm Brian McGill, Chair of the RSU 26 School Board. We did have a discussion of this topic. All 5 school board members were present. I think, first of all, I think I should point out we split the issue into 2 topics. One was the voters and voter pool. The other is when people who get elected start onto the council or the board, and whether that was a productive time or a difficult time to start. So the answer to those 2 questions might differ. Representing the whole board, not necessarily my own opinion, I think there was some expression of Appreciation of the fact that the current March election date results in an electorate that has a very strong degree of understanding of the community and the issues, and in many cases has watched the candidates night or something else like that. I think you could point to the March 21 election when marijuana was on the ballot. It's a good example of when actually a fairly large number of people showed up, probably driven not by local issues, and about 70% of the ballots were blank. But I suspect a very large number of ballots were cast that many more ballots were cast than people who usually vote in municipal elections. I think you can interpret that in a lot of ways, but so that was the broad concern representing, I think, the whole school board. I was probably on one extreme of this issue, but representing the whole school board, I think the concern was that we really value the fact that the municipal elections are people who really engage with municipal issues and have knowledge of the candidates, whether firsthand or secondhand. It's oftentimes secondhand. I also get that participation is almost always a good in democracy, and speaking for myself personally, and it's a slippery slope between seeking high quality voters and suppression of voting. But representing the whole school board, I think the interest was pretty strongly that we appreciate having people who are deeply engaged with the town of Orono, people who are running for office. Putting that aside, the other issue is when people come on to the school board. Currently, they come on in the middle of March, which is exactly in the middle of our budget season, which is a terrible time to come on board as a candidate. For several reasons. The biggest reason is just you're drinking from a fire hose. I think you all know this when you first start up anyway, and to do it in the middle of budget season when the fire hose is running at whatever 3 times its normal volume, the amount of information and things you have to come up to speed on is just impossible. March is pretty much, you couldn't pick a worse time to come onto the school board. That's what's happening currently. We did have a time back when we were a 3-town RSU and the candidates got elected in March and came out in June. Having that 2-month gap was not particularly great because it created lame ducks, but coming on in June was a perfect time to come onto a school board. We also discussed that November would probably be a more perfect for us. The fall is quieter than the spring. November would also be a more preferable time to come on the school board than March. So basically, if we were allowed to rank, times to come on the school board, it would be June, November, March. We currently have March, right? So I haven't heard you guys talk about that too much, but that was one of the stronger considerations at the school board level. I don't know how possible it is. I haven't heard you talk about this, and I know it's a charter adjustment. I know there's wanting to keep the charter adjustment small so it doesn't trigger certain processes. But it's at least conceivable to decouple the school board and town council as well. Because I think that if the school board were to pick a choice, having an election in June, which I would note is the same time we have the budget election. So there's already an election happening. People are already thinking about the schools. I think that would be an optimal choice for the school board, but it may not be a choice. So that's representing a number of different thoughts that came out of the school board.
Yep. Thank you for sharing those.
Captured it all.
Yeah. And how about, I don't know that we have, you want to?
Well, I just had a question for Sophie. Like, would a June, like the town staff is like are they still running? Like, we're trying to do all of everything they got to do for the budget season in June. Or are they kind of slowing down? Could they even, like, I don't want to throw the staff under the bus in a June election if they're like still like hardcore in that, trying to do budget, because that's one more thing on the plate. That's all.
So I will tell you right now, we do elections year round. It really doesn't matter where the council moves the election to. The state is moving some things to March every 4 years anyway. So the other piece is the town manager's office manages the budget, and the town clerk's office manages the election process. I would say that the town clerk's office, you're going to hear later from me, needs some help anyway. In large part due to elections. So yeah, the thing that I would wonder about, and I will say I did not spend our legal dollars until I had more feedback from council around the school board. issue. But if you look in statute, it talks about vacancies in the school board being filled by the town council, municipal officers until the next annual municipal election, which would tell us that there is one municipal election likely. I'm not a lawyer. I don't even play one on TV. So I would want to look into that if there was any thought about trying to separate these two things, because we might run into a statutory conflict. But staff remains very clear that the time of year of the election is not something that we have a recommendation on. We do have a very strong recommendation, which I think is about as vocal as I've ever been, which is one place.
I looked at the, I can't tell from the data if in 2016, we went from two locations to one location. That was one of my observations. I can't tell from the data. I hear anecdotes. I don't want to go up to campus to vote, or, first of all, hats off to all the work the town does to help people vote absentee. I think we have a phenomenal absentee process, and it's going to get even more arduous or more involved, because there's a new state law where it's ongoing absentee ballots. So if you sign up to be an absentee ballot voter, forevermore, the town of Orono is going to have to mail you an absentee ballot until you come off the voter list, whether you request one or not. So over time, we'll get, with their school referendum in June, where 150 people vote, everybody who asks for an absentee ballot in the November election is going to have to get an absentee ballot in the June election, and that's how it's going to have to be. That's a state law, and that's a new thing coming into effect. So that said, I couldn't see anything that jumped out at me in the data in terms of when we moved to one location as to whether or not it made a discernible difference in participation. Again, I heard some anecdotes. I don't want to go up to, I'd rather vote in town. I'd rather, why can't we have it back at the, where at the school or here or at the, I'm missing the Birch Street. Thank you. AA Birch Street.
So I was the election warden at the Birch Street School on the last election, where Matt Dunlap came into the school and said, "Oh, I can see why we
Yeah.
had some complaints."
Yeah.
Because we had people wrapped out into the parking lot and registrars trying to get people registered. One of the biggest issues is if you come in and we have one location and you say, "I'm Sarah Marks," we look at the list and we say, "Sarah Marks, XXX Street." And even if she's moved in the last 2 weeks, she's gonna say, "Yep, that's me. That is who that is." And we check the box and she gets her and she goes. She comes in and she says, we say, "Are you Sarah Marks?" And we say of XX Street. And she's gonna say, "Well, I moved." And we're gonna say, not, "Do you still live in Orono?"
Yeah.
We're gonna say, "Where are you living now?" And she's gonna have to re-register to vote for her new location. And what we were seeing were people, mostly university students, that had moved from one apartment to another. And we were sending them to a different location to have to vote.
Yeah.
And that was frustrating for everybody because you had to stand in line for a long time.
Right.
To get to that point. And so I don't disagree. I've heard it. I've heard I don't want to go up on campus to vote. And the answer is, well, vote right here.
30 days ahead of time.
Vote right here.
Yeah.
And so I kind of, I don't think you're going to be able to find something that makes everything happy, which is why you get to be the elected officials and make the hard decision. But I do think that moving people between polling locations is not a really great customer service.
Yeah.
When was our final vote on our budget? Like, when did we do? End of June or end of July?
End of June.
End of June.
Yeah.
So, thanks, Brian, for the feedback from our partners on the school board. But I guess in theory, that's also a very good time would be a very good time for counselors to come on if we did it in June and then finished out the budget and have the start. It's not a big wait, it's whether it's a couple weeks before we see the beginning of the new session, that really is also, but I think it's telling that that the school board felt June is their first choice.
So the other choice that you would have, so when I look at that and I hear the other concerns that have been raised by counselors about students not being able to vote, you back that up 30, you'd want to say that we would at minimum have a 45-day absentee period if we were going to do that. Because we're marrying it with the state ballot, the only thing that we can't open an absentee period until we have all the ballots for the election. So we just want to make sure that we're aware of the risks that we might run to get to that 30 to 45 day week.
It's the second Tuesday of June. Is that
Yeah.
what June? is?
Yeah, it's the day after council meeting.
Yeah.
Pretty much always.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience have any observations or, I see Representative Osher's here. Lori, thank you for joining us. Any observations about the elections or things you want to share before we start talking about kind of objectives? Yep, please, Tristan.
First, let me just say it's a pleasure to be here. I've met some of you folks outside of this chamber. And I've met some of you in here during last semester. So thank you for having me again. There was a comment I did want to return to. And by the way, I'm sure there was no malicious intent anyway. It was that students were trying to take over the town council. Could we get a little bit more of an elaboration on that?
Is that my comment? Or is that-
No, not. I don't think it was your comment. I think it was a concern that was.
Yeah, I think there's concern about whether students, there's been a concern voiced about whether students who aren't, first of all, it's very clear that, first of all, I don't share this concern, but, and I feel actually 180% differently than this concern, but there's been a concern that, students who aren't, who are here on a academic basis shouldn't be voting in municipal elections or local elections, and it's been, that's a concern some people have about moving the election to November. So, and one, the thought would be, we're coming in from the from this university, about back in this particular candidate, and it's the tidal wave of votes, and that's what happens.
Yeah, in no way, shape, or form. Do I hope you think I was trying to accuse you?
Yeah, I know.
I think you're a great guy.
Oh, thank you. Opinions vary, but I'll take what I can get.
In regards to that concern, I don't think it's as warranted as some people might think. College students are very busy. If we're not focusing on our essays or our midterms, we're just trying to get the next grade. I think that moving elections to November would be very beneficial. I don't see a mass influx of students trying to take over town council. I think it would just be more of a quality of life improvement. And I do hope that it's considered with respect to each and every one of you.
Yeah, thank you.
So just to maybe clarify, mine was that it would be arbitrary. It wasn't that a takeover. It would be, my concern is that it's arbitrary, because to your point, you're busy, you're here for a purpose, which is your education. I was here too. I'm from here, but I was also here at campus. I can tell you, I didn't vote, probably in the local election, even being from here, but that's everyone can. And I think, Brian mentioned something about suppression. There is no suppression. I mean, we have 30 days and anybody can vote in that time. So I guess,
Yeah.
mine was the arbitrary piece to it that I think we end up with. It wasn't a takeover.
And again, no accusations. Thank you so much for elaborating.
Sure.
I just think that any step we can take to improve quality of life for students should be taken. You're absolutely right. It's 30 days, but it's still a struggle for some students.
I'd just like to say thank you for your comments, and me personally, it's not just quality of life for students. Me, it's just a person in the community. It would, for me personally, it would increase my quality of life, because I would rather vote in November once and then not have to come out again in June. But on the other hand, I would do whatever I had to do to vote. But so I understand what you're saying.
Thanks. Did we have another comment in the back? And so could you introduce yourself, please? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jacob Chaplin. I'm the Vice President for Student Leadership at Student Government at UMaine.
But also like what I'm about to say is not the official stance of student government. I'm not here like on behalf. And I want to thank you, Dan, for inviting us.
Oh, sure.
I really appreciate you like bringing up this issue with us. And just a couple of things that I wanted to kind of bring up on it. With the comment on like the high quality voters and like students not being really engaged with this topic and this election. I think that the reason for that is because it's on the date when a majority of us students aren't here and aren't in the town. And even if that's not designed on purpose that way, many students on campus feel that it's designed on purpose and that's purposefully excluding us from the election. And from my experiences with, like I worked as a poll worker, we worked as a poll worker together. I got to work on YouVote on campus to get students to go to vote efforts. And in my experiences, these are students and this is their first time voting. So it's all about convenience and ease of process and making it smooth and easy for them. And the thing that I think is the most important for that, this came up as a discussion in student gov last semester on one of the issues. I think having it on campus when students are there in classes is the most easy way to get students engaged and students to vote. If you have it there in between classes, students can go in the morning on breakfast together, having students help run the process. The students are there, they feel that they're part of the community and part of the group that's running it. I really think that that's an important factor in this conversation and in the little debate for it. And I think that when it comes to moving the election away from the March date, I think that moving it to the June date is the same issue and students will just be here again in a couple of years talking about that. So I think that if we're going to move it, I think moving it to the November date is really important and having it on campus is probably the best way to get students to vote.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Lloyd?
I am Lori Osher and I represent Orono in the legislature. Before that, I was representing Orono on the town council. And in your notes for this meeting, someone had requested information about whether there were ever November elections for town council. And there was one in 2017 because there was someone who left in the summer, leaving almost a year and a half of their 3-year term. So the town council decided, and there were going to be already 3 people elected in that coming March. So they wouldn't have 4 people. So it was the 1 year. Every 3 years, the town elects 3 people. The other years just elects. So I ran for office in the fall of 2017, starting on August when it was announced. And then I ran again when my term was up. And so I actually have that experience of knocking on doors at both times of the year. And I can say that it was much better for democracy to have a candidate be able to knock doors from August to November than from November to March or December to March. It's just really dark in the winter, and it's just not the best time to go engage people at the doors. And that's a valuable part of democracy. Since then when I ran for the legislature, it was COVID. It didn't launch in February before things shut down. And I had planned a bunch of house parties and door knocking. Those things were out during the beginning of COVID. And so I did it. I did outreach every week on Facebook and engaged people that way. But also in 2017, I went to campus every week and had a table outside the student union because I was not being a student. I couldn't be inside the student union, and it would have been really cold to do that in the winter. And I didn't do it as much in my second time. And so I think part of our role as a town that is the host to a major university, the largest university in the state, and we are training people how to be good citizens. One of the ways we do that is making democracy transparent and easy and accessible. And we live in a climate where it's dark and cold in the winter. And so putting our elections at a time where it's easier to physically engage, even when we have COVID, that was a challenge. But I do think that my own experience of running and I don't know, it was 5,000 people voted in the November election. That's a lot in 2017.
2020, 5,300.
Yeah, 5,300 versus, we get less than 1,000 in March. And I don't know what the blanks were that year, but I know that engaging the populace in the goal of trying to make better government is part of how we are educating our community, and is part of our job, I think, is educating the students to be better citizens. There's my vote for changing it to November.
Lori, why do you think we get 500 instead of 5,000 in March? What do you think the reason for that is?
I guess I'd have to echo what Sonia said, which is I have always been a voter everywhere I've lived. I was an academic, so I moved from one university town to another. And I always thought of myself as a voter. And I think I lived here for a few years because I was just new and trying to make babies. And then I made babies. There were two of them and one of me. And I just like was working and somehow I don't recall when I started voting in municipal elections. And I'm a really engaged political person and I have been my whole adult life. So I think that it runs under people's radar, especially when they're new to our town. It's not very welcoming to hide it when the rest of America thinks voting is in November. And other towns, and it comes from I think it's the history of Maine, which we had one annual meeting and they put it in March because people were not in the fields and you're not planting yet. And, it made a lot of sense, but most of the towns that are big, the size we are, have switched to November. And so this is a holdover. And I think, so I myself, like Sonia, I thought I was an engaged citizen and suddenly I was like, wow, there's elections. And then I was very adamant about encouraging other people and I would give my students when I was a professor the day off to vote and encourage them. But I think that it's a little bit hidden. And part of our role is to encourage people to be engaged in the political process.
Thank you. So, Sarah, I know we're
Are we past
running
time?
over time
I
on
can
it,
wait.
right? It's hard to run these things, sorry. Yeah.
My comments
Yeah.
can hold for our next discussion. That's fine.
Well, yeah, I think it's, unless anyone else has some comments, I think maybe objectives in terms of what we want to, add.
I
Right.
personally would like to move this forward to the voters. I feel like there are a lot of reasons to move potentially the election to November. I think we've heard things on both sides, but I feel like especially when an issue has both sides, people debating, it's great to bring it to the voters. So I just don't see any downside to bringing the issue to the voters and letting the voters of Orono decide when they want to have this election. And I personally feel like I've appreciated the comments about access because I think it's not just access for students. It's also access for people who don't want to go out in ice and snow, which happens in March a lot more than happens in November. And I also think it's faculty and spouses of faculty, and June would be terrible for me in that regard when people clear out of Orono. So for me, access for all voters, as many voters as possible, and I would like to bring it to the public to decide when they think that is, or what their values are.
Me too.
Is this the vote to bring it to the public or the vote to?
I don't know.
bring
No,
it-
this is the vote to bring it to ourselves, to send it to public hearing, to bring it to ourselves again, to send it to the public.
The second date.
And also, we're not voting. We don't
Not
vote at
voting.
committee meeting. We just give the thumbs up.
Formal consideration, lots of chances to come back and hang out with us, right? Formal consideration at our town council meeting, which is the 16th, because of Indigenous Peoples' Day, it's moved back. Then a regular town council meeting, public hearing, so everyone will be able to come in, we'll have the podium set up and people will be able to have a conversation. Town council meeting for the formal call, and then everyone will get a voice at the municipal election in March of 2024. So that's the timeline, and I think it's really well laid out. I'm in favor of it. I'm in favor of November as opposed to June for the reasons that we heard about, doesn't do us any good with our, being a college town and having a municipal election when I do think it makes sense to keep our municipal election together, to the extent that, if the school board wanted to weigh in and really weigh in about not doing that, I think that's a longer conversation, but I think it makes sense to do the municipal election as one election, and I prefer to do it. I want an election that brings more people together. I want to be accountable to people who don't vote in March. I want to be accountable to anybody who votes in Orono at any time, at our biggest election as an elected representative. So that's how I come at it.
I just wanted clarification here. So we're gonna come to our next meeting, agree to have a hearing where we're gonna hear from the community. But I think I've heard everyone's already say that we want to put this to vote. Is there a point in the hearing at this point? Because it seems like.
You have to have one.
It's that end of the table.
So it's just a formality that we're gonna have. a
Well,
hearing.
I think that there may be other people who have not yet heard of this issue who want to come and speak to us, but I think it's important that we have a meeting and a process. We have
Agreed. 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
so
not
I
I'm
just
not questioning
think-
that. I'm questioning the foregone conclusion that we're putting it to voting.
So I'm also in
Yeah.
favor of this change, but as Dan just brought up, there's some question coming from the school board around decoupling and the potential for that. And if the school board cares a lot about that side of things, that's one of the functions of having a public hearing is for us to think about, even if a lot of us have this, as you put it, foregone conclusion about this, which, you know, I'm not saying you're wrong to put it that way. I think the majority of us feel this way. But there's still details to be worked out. And I think that it's also not a bad thing for us to hear from more of you who care about this.
And I personally hope that if I'm given very succinct and good reasons to change my mind, then I'll be open to change my mind. And this gives us time to have our minds changed if we need it. So I think the process is good, and I don't have a problem with thinking I have something that I want to do in the future, but then have somebody come along and be like, well, have you thought about this? And be like, wow, that really, that really is a game changer for me. I hope I can have game changers.
Totally agreed. I hope we're all open to hearing what people have to say and changing our opinions. If we hear something different, or if there's a lot of folks that bring a different concern forward.
Brian, do we want to have and Sophie, what's the process for, do you want to engage in a conversation about a different proposal as part of the public hearing? I mean, what do you want to do?
I mean, our role in this is just to pass on our preferences, right? You guys have the final decision. So I'll take this back to the school board. If they have a strong opinion they want me to bring back, they can either bring it themselves or I'll bring it back. But at this point, we don't have a formal rule bigger than just showing up at the public hearing and expressing an opinion. So I think that's appropriate.
So I would think that you would like me to talk with the town attorney about decoupling. I also, one of the things I was looking for is up until today, you hadn't really formalized June, November, some other day.
Yeah.
So you now know November, I need to go through the charter and look at what elements with that, but also if there are elements within the ordinance that would also need to be changed, we've got to kind of start lining things up. So I think at this point, what you're suggesting to take as I'm calling a public hearing, you're calling a public hearing on the change from March to whenever, to November is
Yeah.
what you've told me. So that's what gets published as the public hearing. Before that date of the public hearing, we need to, well before that date, so the next time we meet as a group, need to agree on some general language that is going to get posted for people to be able to respond to as part of the public hearing.
Yep.
So
That's in November, the public hearing, so
Yep.
it gives plenty of time for us to have more conversations about. Yeah.
not a ton of time,
Yeah.
because if you're asking people to come give feedback, you've got to kind of have it out there when you're giving feedback on.
Sure.
Can I just ask the council? So everyone is thumbs up, go ask the attorney if we should decouple with the school board to do it at a different time. Is that what I just heard?
I think we should find out if that's even a possibility.
Well, let me.
From what I heard
well,
from Sophie, it sounds like
but
it
should-
might or might not.
Oh, So that means we'd be comfortable if they came back and it's a possibility. I'm just curious how this is great for democracy, except for electing school board members.
I don't think I'm there, I'm not there.
There.
Yeah.
So I guess we want to spend attorney dollars to go ask a question that we're not there on.
The school board seems to have strong feelings on at least one half of how Brian had laid out sort of the different.
But it's our decision.
Right.
Yeah, sure. But we also want to do what's best for everybody and take the perspective of those other elected officials really seriously who are affected by our decision. If it's a huge involved process, I wouldn't want there to be like endless research done on this topic, but if we find out, would that as an option, if we do at the public hearing here, that the school board feels very strongly about this and would want to decouple if we were going to November. And it wasn't an impossibility for the process for a charter change. of this size, then it'd be worth considering. But, I am for the same reasons that we want to move many of us want to move the town council, the municipal election, to November. I would think that we would want the same thing for the school board, but if the school board comes back to us and says they feel differently, I want us to take that into consideration as we make this decision.
It seems like that'd be a really hard thing to reconcile, that this is the best for democracy but not for school board, but I guess we'll cross that bridge.
Yeah, I think we'll have to. Does that make sense for this agenda item? Sophie, thank you for this. Excellent. Thank you for everyone who participated in the conversation, and you'll have many more opportunities to. Sophie.
I'm just wondering, given the lateness of the hour, we have invited Marcus Ballou from Maine Municipal Association to join us. I thought that we would be ready for him about 6. We still have probably 20+ minutes of 30 minutes of community development work. Would anybody be interested in moving him up on the agenda, because he has to travel a distance to get home?
I'm all about it.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I'd love to be flexible to that.
Thanks for coming.
Good night, folks.
So pass it off to Leo for that, and then
Oh, right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you wouldn't mind, I mean.
All right, we'll jump down to finance operations. And sorry, I didn't catch the name, but we have somebody here. Oh, Marcus Ballou, sorry. Help us understand the town's property and casualty coverage. I think this
Would be great.
stems around the use of our facilities, correct?
So the issues that were brought to my attention that council wanted to talk about were issues around what constituted a program that the town would be under town insurance versus not, and also use of our facilities. So I would love Marcus to give you just a really brief overview of your, like, who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, one, thank you very much for inviting me up here to speak. I love the opportunity to meet with you all. Also appreciate the opportunity to put me up on the agenda a little bit. I've had a long, stressful couple of weeks with some family emergencies, so getting back is greatly appreciated. So I really thank you for that. My name is Marcus Ballou. I work for Maine Municipal Association. I've been there for almost 20 years. Been representing municipalities for nearly 30 years. In risk management practices and transfer of risk over municipal entities. So my primary focus for 30 years realistically is protecting municipalities and helping them make decisions that not only keep them safe, but also protect the constituents that they represent. We really are a broad focused entity that is looking to make recommendations and protections that help not only your entity, but everybody. That's my real quick narrative as far as what our goals are as the municipal association. But our primary focus is, of course, protecting you. And in the event that something goes wrong, stepping up, representing you, defending you, and making sure that you have your assets protected, as well as your personal liabilities that are out there, and affording all protections that we can under the Maine Tort Claims Act. So that's the quick 10,000-foot view of what we do. But I'd be more than willing to answer specific questions as to what we do as well if there.
Yeah. I'll go first, I guess. If that's okay. Yeah. I know that still wearing my community development hat, and coming off perhaps the greatest potluck in Orono history on Sunday night. We really want to be able to have people use our facilities and lower the barriers. And we know we've got a requirement for insurance when people use our facilities. And I think we've got maybe a policy decision to make about how we understanding we need to have insurance, but how do we make it as easy as possible for people that are trying to have, teach karate or do yoga classes or things like that, and make it as easy as possible. So that's kind of the conversation we have. And we understand that, as I understand, we have within our policy, people can pay for like a one-time use of insurance. Is that what we do?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
used to be the TULIP program, and they just changed it
Just
to
changed it.
GUARD.
Gather guard.
other
guard, yeah, it's, and
The other
it's
guard.
not our program. What we did, and that was a great introduction, because I can go right into quite a few
Sure.
caveats with that. I think I'll start more with the premise of facility use as a whole for a community. I'm absolutely for that. I mean, I obviously, I live here in Maine, I live in a community and I want the same things. I participated in a recreation committee that was completely separate from our town. And as a piece of that, we had to get our insurance to provide that evidence to our municipality in order to proceed with that. But there's a number of reasons why that recommendation is there. It's not an obstacle for the use of a facility. You know, I hear the argument all the time, I'm a taxpaying citizen, why shouldn't I be able to use that facility? And I'm not saying you shouldn't be able to use it, but I do want to make sure it's fair and equitable, that your use is across the board, not going to impact everybody else that's involved. That is how we kind of see that. And what I mean by that, and I can give some examples, I did claims management for years. And facility use and evidence of insurance is sometimes looked as an obstacle. It's a deterrent for use. And it really isn't. It's a protection not only for the municipality, but it's a protection for the users. And what I mean by that is I can give you an example of a very tragic claim that I had to administer. I will start off with everybody involved in that is okay today. But at the time it is very sad, and it actually caused a rift in the community that lasted for years. And what happened is it was a nice community center, had a wraparound deck, looked out over the water. It was used all the time for wedding receptions, bridal showers, birthday parties, you name it, just because it was a great location. They recommended insurance, they didn't mandate it. At this one event, they were setting up for a wedding reception. And it was hot, it was June. They said, hey, Bob, will you go open that door and let some air in? Well, what Bob didn't know, no one knew, is on the other side of that door was a small child sitting on the railing who got jettisoned off that railing, landed in a dumpster full of construction debris, tragically injured, again, okay today. But we're talking medevac flight. We're talking actually medevac jet. Lots of medical bills and a very sad day that was supposed to be a very happy day. Again, in this situation, they did not have insurance, the people that were putting on the event. And the people that got hurt, the child that got hurt, that family, honestly, they were the family that supported everybody in that town. You know, they were the farm on the hill that literally not only said they would give the shirt, did it multiple times. But at the same time, didn't have the money to pay for these. I mean, these are bills that, you know, even with insurance can be difficult. So they ended up in a situation where their only resort was to sue everybody because there were no policies there to protect anybody. So they sued Bob, who opened the door. They sued Mark and Vivian, who were having the wedding reception. They sued the people who were doing the decorations. They sued the caterers, and they also sued the municipality. So the problem with that is too, now we come back to my role again, in the role of Maine Municipal Association Risk Management Services. Our job is to defend you. So in that given situation, the municipality didn't do anything wrong. They just provided a building. It was completely safe. There was nothing wrong with the operation or control of that building. But they're still sued. There's nothing that stops them from being litigated against. So the insurance company had to incur the costs to defend the municipality, get them out of that, which is what ultimately happened. But what's the next step in that process? And what's the next step in that process for everyone else who got sued in that is to attempt to get their funds back. That's our obligation. So you're in a situation now where not only did that poor family incur a tragic event, they sued folks, they didn't win. The municipality now has to go back against them to try and get that property back, that financial loss that was incurred by the community, because that's your job too. I mean, we all, you know, I've sat on councils too. We take a fiduciary oath to protect the municipality as a whole, not the individual. So the obligation was to get that funding back. So you're in a situation now where the municipality is literally going after one of their community members to get money back, all for something that could have been avoided with a $70 policy that not only protected the community, it produces equity and fairness of use in their buildings, and also protected those individuals that were in that building from that event.
But is there a way, like, when we hand someone the key, like, there's some events, like, if you, like, I think everyone, I understand why people need to have insurance. I don't have any doubt that it needs to be that coverage in place. I think the question is there a way for this council as a policy decision or as a matter of, resource allocation to provide, here's your key, and oh, by the way, with it, you have coverage, with this, is there a easiest way, is there a way to just blanket coverage for the event, for that facility, for municipal event? If someone's gonna try and make some money in it, they're gonna host a fundraiser, some kind of, commercial event, they're borrowing our space to do it, we're renting our space to do it, that's one thing. But if a community member wants to bring people together or, teach a class or do, is there a way to make that just, here's the key, the lights are over here, please, flush the toilets when you leave and you have insurance because you're doing an event that invites the whole community to participate.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Like, I fully agree that I don't think any of us have ever been suggesting that folks should be using the space without insurance. I think our question is, do we have a way that we can have a different insurance policy than the one we have now, where we would cover folks who were doing events for the entire community that we approved, as this is a town approved event, not someone hosting a wedding reception or something for a limited number of their own folks, whether it's making money or not.
So that
For me, that's my question. And I just want to add one more thing, which is, I'm not sure if it's as simple as handing a key.
Yeah.
My question is it as simple as people have to come and do a training and then that's the way it is? Or, what would need to be in place for us to be able to say to folks, we have a policy where you do these things and your event that's open to the entire community is now town approved and covered.
So we have that.
Yeah.
We have that.
So
And in order for an event to qualify for our insurance coverage, Marcus has a nice little cheat sheet
that's what we
Yeah.
need to say.
that is
Thanks.
essentially the town has to have some level of control over the event. So if there is money being collected, the town has to take in that money and we can disperse it later, but we've got to take it in, account for it. We have to have oversight. So for example, when we had arts people in the building, we took the gate fees and we had a revenue share agreement with them where they got some back. But we paid them for the event. And ultimately, they had to come up with a plan that passed muster with our life safety people and the Parks and Rec. At the time of this makes sense and meets our protocol for safety and our general rules for how we operate. So that is why when you look at the stuff that's come out from Parks and Rec over the last many years, it talks about 4 options for having events. If you've got an event that's open to the public, you want to run your own dance for Indigenous Peoples' Day. You contact Megan and say, I want to have a community dance for Indigenous Peoples' Day. And she talks to you about the 4 different ways you can have that event. One of them is renting it, renting the facility in which the town does not get involved one way or the other in how you do it, but you gotta provide us with proof of insurance coverage. And that runs right up to, it's a town-sponsored event that you work with staff to put on, but it's a spectrum. There are other steps along the way. And, Marcus needs to close his ears for a minute, but depending on what we're working with, sometimes that oversight is a matter of, here's your plan, you do all the work, and we just approve it and say that works. That's oversight. Doesn't mean that the town has to take control of what you do. It means you have to meet our general rules that we have for operations. And you can open your ears again.
With the town, with the town oversight scenario, they don't need to go for insurance.
Can I expand a little bit?
So we protect the municipality. and we protect what the municipality does and what the municipality owns. I think where the disconnect falls in line a little bit with this is that, if you formulate a committee that's going to control these activities and they fall under the auspice of that appointed committee for the municipality, it's part of the municipality. But if I want to come in here and use your space because I want to hold a private karate event, just because that was brought up as an example, that's not a municipal event, that's a private activity. So if it is truly a municipal event where all the financial controls run through the municipality, it's accounted for by the town treasurer, run through the annual audit. The town manager or the council has got the oversight and control to stop, modify, and dictate of that event. And that can be by appointing committee members to control it. That's a municipal activity and generally covered under the coverage that you have now. So there's no additional coverage needed. It's not an extra event. It just has to truly be a town activity. A lot of entities try to dance that line and say, oh yeah, it's a town event, but we're going to keep our money in our bank account over here. Well, if it's a separate bank account and it's not the municipal bank account, that comes up to terms that people don't like to see in the paper, which is a misappropriation of public funds. So that's why I'm saying it's really not that hard to delineate what is the town and what isn't the town. If it's a town action right now, you're already covered. And if you guys control it or appoint individuals of your community to control it and put it underway, we just need to know that coverage. What this is more in line to is the private activities that take place, the private rentals, the private usage. Because that's where you really have to be careful, because the town can't be expecting funds for the betterment of, certain entities, because that's actually can be construed as a discriminatory process or giving an advantage to one group over another, which we can't do, or competition with private practice, we can't do. Some of these things where we see constraints, it's just due to the sole fact that we are a governmental body. And because we're a governmental body, we are legislatively created and there's certain rules that we have to follow. And when it comes to use of taxpayer dollars, it's there for a reason. So that's, they really aren't obstacles. They're just really trying to look at how groups are formulated, whether they are part of the municipality or not. And if they aren't part of the municipality, we still don't want to say no. We just want to give recommendations to transfer that risk and make sure that the exposures that are done by me having a birthday party don't impact you all as a taxpayer if I do something wrong. If I bring in helium, which I'm not supposed to do in some buildings, and it causes a fire because the candles get close to it and it explodes and it harms somebody and burns the building down, why should all of you in this room share in that cost and expense because of my error?
So the process to cover that birthday party now is what? We've got this, it's not Tulip anymore, it's something else.
Well, it's basically the same program. What Tulip stood for was Tenant User Liability Insurance Program. And what happened is, this is not new. This is not my first meeting on facility use or agreements or town space or any of these things that happens all the time. And for decades, we were making the recommendations. And again, I guess I should back up with that too. These are our recommendations. This is your community. This is your town. You can look at everything that we said from Maine Municipal's perspective as risk managers, although we hope you don't, and just say, we're going to ignore it. We're going to do what we want to do and we're moving on.
And it will impact our premium.
Could potentially. I mean, if you have, a litany of claims that come out of this because of accidents and injuries and loss of property, ultimately,
But I
I'm
check,
not going to fib to you.
but I check a box during the
It is-
renewal
It is
process.
a consideration for the underwriters when they look at it. Is that if you're not going to have controls in place, of course, the exposure is higher. And it could impact overall pricing as well as claims activity. But we do strongly recommend these practices, but it is your community. But in the event something goes wrong and we have to come out and do the other side of it, I just ask, don't be mad at me. When we have to manage the claim and the expenses that are associated with it.
So I'm sorry, you still didn't answer my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Tulip's out.
Oh, yes, no. So, yes, so there's the tenant. So what happened? Sorry, I get.
That's all right. Yeah.
What basically happened is we've been making these recommendations for years and it used to be quite simple. 20 years ago, call your homeowner's insurance, get a rider off your homeowners, ask to have the town named as an additional insured. Within about 5 minutes, you can have a certificate and you can be out the door. Sadly, the insurance market has hardened, which means it's more difficult to get such things done. I'm an insurance geek, so I have, big umbrella policies and things like that, so it's quite easy for me, but not everybody has those. So, we're not dictating also where they get the coverage. What this TULIP program is that we got contacted by multiple municipalities and said, our folks are telling us they don't have an avenue to get it. The homeowners policies aren't doing it. The commercial insurers, if you were to just go buy a policy for that day, is hundreds of dollars, which it is. If you went to buy a commercial event rider, they normally start at about, $350 and go up. And that, that is a cost burden, that's difficult at that point in time. So they reached out to us and said, is there something out there that you could find that our community members could potentially use? So we used our relationship. We have a broker that is Hub International, New England, and they scoured out there, and through negotiations with us, we were able to negotiate this product that could be used by your community. It is not us. We only provide coverage to governmental entities in the state of Maine. So we just were sort of an arm that sort of leveraged to get this tool negotiated at a cost point that was effective for communities. The TULIP has transitioned to a new company, which is just called GatherGuard. It's underwritten by Enact.
Underwritten by who? I'm
I
sorry.
think it's Enact, INACT.
So to put this into perspective for you, you want to rent the Keith Anderson for your private park. And you go through and you sign up through our civic rec program to rent on a specific day. As soon as you do that, the rec director staff gets a notice. We send you okay, we're glad that you want to do this. We're going to need proof of insurance with the town listed as an additional insured for this event. Some places are nonprofits that already have that and can get us a rider very easily, or even businesses. Some homeowners still will do it. And then in that email, we tell them, or you can go online at this address using this code. And the reason we do it that way is there is a special code for Orono that we want to have associated with people who are renting from our facilities. So GatherGuard went into effect a couple of weeks ago. This morning when I came in, so Parks and Rec manages it, but since I am the contact for the insurance company, I'm the one that gets the notice that such and such a person who has rented our facility now has this GatherGuard and coverage, and I send it to Parks and Rec. They check the box and you can pick up your key when you want your key. So what's interesting is I was afraid that costs were going to go up, and it's actually was pretty much a boilerplate for us of $77. This was $75. So we're still in that ballpark, a bit less.
So is it like a page application, or is it?
It's actually very, very simple. You pick the location, you pick the date of your event. It's going to ask you questions of whether you've had it before, whether you've had claims. The big one on there, they're going to ask about armed security or the sale of alcohol. In most situations, that's a no. And then you hit a button and it says provide a quick quote. And that's one of the things I always tell folks too, because we don't care where people get insurance. And it's not your job as a community to tell them where to get the insurance. You don't want to, my wife reminds me on a daily basis that most people do not find insurance as exciting as I do. And shouldn't turn them into insurance agents. So all this does is you can push that button, it'll produce a quick quote. I tell folks, print that off, call your local agent, call whoever's doing your homeowners and say, I'm doing an event on this day, can you beat this price? If it's your homeowner's policy and they can do it, they'll say, yeah, we can just issue a rider off your home. If they can't do that, they'll say, yeah, we can run a quote. And I've never seen it beat. The only time I've seen it beat, actually I shouldn't say never, is when people try to use it as a blanket insurance policy where they're gonna have 55 events throughout the year. And that doesn't work. If you're gonna have multiple events like that, then you should buy a blanket commercial policy. But if you're gonna have that one day single event, I've never seen it beat.
So the other place, I was contacted by a group that likes to do tango and wanted to utilize our space. And I looked at that and I said, that would be pretty cool for the general public. Was there a way that the general public could sign on and not be a member of your group, but sign on for the lessons component? And we're in the process of negotiating. Is it a rec program? Do they need insurance? Do they not need insurance? But it's part of a bigger package because I'm willing to not charge rental on the room if they have insurance. Do you know, and we'll cover it. So it's kind of, it becomes a bargaining piece. But some people don't want to give up control of their event. They want to do what they want to do, how they want to do it. And that's not a negative, but it just means that it makes it really hard to then absorb it as part of the town.
And it truly does have to be part of the town to do it. You know, there's situations similar to like that you just explained where you know, they wanted to open it up for everybody and the karate instructor said, yep, everybody can participate. But then that individual still wanted to keep the funding and you can't do that. So that's where, you know, there's a bit of a divide and they've got to make the decision that this is either a town committee where, you know, that individual is going to be then contracted by the municipality or paid, you know, as an employee of that municipality. If they're paid by the municipality or do that free as a volunteer effort as the rec committee, that's already part of the town. If the town contracts to have that done, then I'm still going to fall back on the same recommendation. If that individual is now a contractor, just like all contractors that the municipality utilizes, they need to have their own insurance. And then I'm even going to step it up a little higher. Now I also want to see that they have comp coverage because without that, there's also some financial burden on the municipality. And it's just, again, these aren't obstacles that we're trying to put up, but they are logistic that have to be considered.
So another example, an individual contacted us because they'd really like to do a youth art program. Went through the whole piece, got references. This seemed like it would be a great initiative. We, when we got to the insurance piece, this person does not have insurance. So I hired a per diem art instructor who is working with Parks and Rec to identify the curriculum, to be able to say what this is for. So we're very clear what we're hiring them for. And miraculously, they are getting a pay per class and they don't have to pay insurance, but it meets our needs and we are registering people through our system. We're taking the money and we're paying them a set fee for what they're doing.
So my questions are, Chief, you want to go first?
So go ahead.
My questions are, as I'm looking at this list, I see if there's an option for if you're a town committee or if you're an association. I'm really interested in people who are just individuals who want to offer a community program. They're not a committee, they're not an association. So maybe somebody wants to start a knitting club, right? And they're a volunteer. They don't want to be paid for their time. So no money is going to be changing hands at all. So the money factor is eliminated. They simply want to offer a club event to the community, knitting club, or I've heard some people say, we'd like a baby group in the Keith Anderson where we could gather and play with babies one morning a week, those of us who have kids in town. So something like that, where people don't want to be paid and they're not part of an organized committee of any kind, and they want to offer it free to everyone in the community. So would those folks automatically be covered under our insurance if they came to Sophie and Sophie said, this seems like something that would benefit the town, so we would like to allow this to happen?
But Sophie wouldn't say it that way.
So this is what I'm asking.
Sophie would say, wow, this seems like a really cool thing. And Parks and Rec, this seems like something that would add to the community. Is this something that we could put together? Would you meet with this person to find out how we could make a toddler time or of whatever, knitting club time. And then have that person meet with Parks and Rec, look at how it would work. Does it meet our requirements in terms of safety and is there a designated person? And Parks and Rec promotes that as a town sponsored event. That now is part of the town. I mean, I don't think you have to charge for it.
No.
But if people run around the community and want to do something and don't want to talk to Parks and Rec about it, it makes it really hard to then have conversations about how it can be absorbed and managed in a way that would allow for coverage.
Yeah, I don't think anyone doesn't want to talk to Parks and Rec. I'm just trying to get clarity on how that would work. And Sophie, how long would that process typically take? If somebody
Depends on
wanted to-
how complicated it
Right.
was. If somebody came to us and said, I have a great idea for a language knitting club where we were gonna practice Spanish and knit. And we would say, oh, that sounds really cool. What do you want to do? And how do you want to do it? And walk them through the building as to what they can do and how they can do it. And then promote it. That's usually, as long as they follow the guidelines, which really aren't that onerous. But it has to be, Parks and Rec has to kind of,
To be part of it.
has to be part of it.
But for people to have an idea, I mean, for something simple that's not really complex, that sounds quite fast. Number of weeks, potentially, month, or
Not
not even days. Okay, so pretty quick. I just think it's important for the public to know. So like,
Our response time oftentimes is elongated by people's response
Sure.
time to
sure.
what we need.
It's really, really helpful though, because like at the potluck, there were already people coming up saying, oh, this space, this is so great. And I have this idea. And I had 3 or 4 ideas brought to me right away. And I sent them all your way. But I think it's helpful to be able to tell people, they can expect pretty quick responses. So Jeff, you're on you.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just gonna say that I've used town facilities for a number of years, in a variety of different ways, right? From birthday parties to programming and all kinds of things. And what I have always found is that the town has been really flexible working with me and with other people doing that. But there is a perception problem in the community about how to interface with the town. And so, yeah. And so I think, like, I'm not sure that this requires council action. Like, I don't think we need this is my personal opinion. I don't think we need a new policy, right? I think, we've, but we do need, and maybe it's a burden on us, right? Is that we need to communicate better to the community that these avenues for interacting with the town exist. I mean, it is a little daunting if you've never met anybody in the town office to go in, you don't know who to speak with, right? So, to the extent that we can facilitate that, it's fine. And the other piece I've heard or that I've sort of had some experience with is that when I was doing a program for the town and had to go out and get some insurance, I was a little bit at sea at first. I didn't know. I knew I needed something more than a rider on my homeowner's insurance. I wasn't a commercial operation, so I didn't need full, kind of commercial insurance. It would be really nice, and maybe MMA has this, or maybe the town has this, if we had like a primer to say, this is the level of insurance that we think a program like this requires. So I ended up going out for my program, found some insurance that was reasonably priced. I thought the coverage was decent. But I had to do a little bit of legwork to do that. And it wasn't that there was an unwillingness on the part of the town to help me find it. I just don't know that anybody really knew where to begin to look, So that piece, maybe if MMA has some resources it could share with us on where to find, where individuals outside of the town should find.
And that's exactly what this Gather Guard program was designed to do. It already has pre-established rates, it has pre-established limits. The general limit that we recommend is $1 million. The minimum that I would wouldn't even recommend it, but the minimum that if I was in a municipal seat that I would ever accept would be 400,000, because that's what Maine Tort Claims is right now. Claims that. But $1 million is a universal golden standard as far as most commercial policies right now that are out there. The Gather Guard program, that is where it begins. That's the established rates. It automatically links to name the municipality as an additional insured. So it's designed, really, it takes all those steps out of it. That said, we're not going to ever say that that's the dictated coverage that you should use, because that's not our place. That's not your place. You just want them to have the insurances that are there.
Is it a one-time thing? Like, can you only do it, like, if you wanted to do yoga classes for, year round? I mean, do you have to go and do a Gather Guard every time, or can it last for you?
No, I mean, you can pick multiple dates on that calendar. And I was actually talking about it sadly right at this time when you stepped out. This program works great for small time special events. If there's something that's going to take place where somebody's going to be conducting classes, every Sunday or every Saturday, this would not be the product to do. At that point in time, it'd be in their interest, as far as my recommendation, that they go out and get a commercial policy, because it would cover it throughout all their operations for what they do, probably at the same cost, if not less, when you're putting in multiple days.
Yeah.
And then, in regards to this, this was designed for a different activity. It's just sort of it wasn't designed for today's meeting. If you want to read this, probably easier, just change the topics or the headers to town versus private. And the reason for that is, you're talking about a potluck that happened. Sadly, one of the largest claims I ever administered was a chicken barbecue.
There was no barbecue.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying that, people go, oh, it's an innocuous event. No one ever really knows what that event is, but this was a beat hole dinner, chicken barbecue that's happened every year for.
23 types of cookies, chocolate chip cookies, many of them gluten-free. So
Yeah, no, it's right up my alley.
Yeah.
But that was one where, it was a cold day and it rained and they didn't get the pits hot enough, but just like in my town, it was advertised for 11:30. Everybody showed up at 11:30.
Yeah.
They served that chicken and they had 110 counts of food poisoning and salmonella at about an average cost of $10,000 a piece. And if you do that math real quick, we're over $1 million.
Yeah. I think the challenge here, and there's some ways that we can interact in commerce and Facebook, I can do a Facebook event from my phone in 30 seconds. And I'm sure you can do it in 15, there's just, we're getting, so people, the idea, I gotta do something else to do my thing, and I understand it. And to the extent that we can help communicate these resources exist and that people can access them fairly quickly, I get, I don't want to do more. I just want to have my, we have a knitting club at my house every other Tuesday, and we didn't go, I assume we're covered with our homeowners insurance or whatever, but it was easy, and we didn't want to, we didn't need to use the town facility to do it. So it's that, I think it's a communication thing. It's what I'm saying.
I have one, or maybe it's two, but I think it's one. Sophie, at one point you mentioned to us that when you started here, there were a lot of events happening that people thought had insurance under Parks and Rec, but they didn't.
Yep.
And that you had to correct for that.
Yep.
And so I guess I'm just curious, I'm assuming that's all corrected because you did that years ago, but how did that even happen? Why were there events that weren't covered under Parks and Rec if people had come to Parks and Rec and done this process? Or had they just not done that? I guess I'm.
So when I arrived here.
Yeah.
Parks and Rec like to think of the Parks and Rec umbrella, which is, that's a great thing. You go do it.
Oh.
You wanna have a Lego team, go ahead, go have a Lego team. That's fine. You wanna run an travel basketball, you can do that. But there are rules that kind of you gotta follow. And we found that there were lots of people with access to the building. People still come back and say, my key won't work. And I'm like, oh yeah, there hasn't been that key for a decade. But yeah, it was just a matter of the town said I could do it.
Okay, so pretty much it was either that they hadn't done the safety requirements conversation with Parks and Rec, or that they somehow were collecting money that wasn't through Parks and Rec. So those would be the two big things we're watching.
For example, if you wanted to do a travel basketball program, we had somebody come to us that wanted to do a single travel basketball for boys. I would say to you, well, we need to find out where we could find a girls' coach. so that we can offer both.
Yeah.
Or a co-ed team, like it's not just safety, it's also
Perfect.
equity and things like that.
Great example. And my last question is, you said there were 4 different levels and I've heard us talk about 2, I feel like the extremes. Are there 2 others in the middle that we haven't even mentioned?
Yep, so we do contract sports, contracts, which is what Jeff refers to, where he was an independent contractor. He had to come up with his own insurance. We had a simple scope of work. We didn't get into the middle of what he did. He had access to our buildings. We, some of them, they accept, I think they pay us, but then we paid you for the event. Or they paid you directly.
Registration was handled through Parks and Rec.
Yep.
And then there was a reimbursement to me. But I mean,
Yep.
I don't think anybody starts these programs to make money. Like, I
No.
think they're there for community.
And
purposes.
then there is a collaborative way that we would do it, which is what we have done in the past with other kind of nonprofits, which is a semi-sponsorship collaboration.
So in terms of our messaging, that might be what we look at as a council for how to really message that out about these 4 ways.
And I
future
think if you
discussion.
look on the Parks and Rec webpage, at least it used to detail, I haven't been on that page in a little bit, but it used to detail the methods, and those would be the methods that we use.
And I guess I gotta put my first management hat on, so, as far as collaborations go, those can be tricky because you can't remove all adjoined liabilities, because in that situation, if they truly are an association, I'm assuming that they're a legal entity that's declared themselves separate from the municipality, and therefore extended coverages to that association under the municipality.
Nope, that's why they name us as an additional insured on there.
There's a system for it. It's all great.
Yeah.
Okay, I got all my questions answered. Thank you.
I had maybe just one more that's really curiosity. I'm curious whether Orono Health Association, the Historical Society, some of those community groups are covered under our existing insurance and how that works.
So we have rental agreements. But we're working to renew them. And as part of that, they indemnify and hold us harmless.
Great, thanks.
Most of those commercial entities, even nonprofit, will have their own policy that can extend all the work protections that the municipality needs.
And I would argue that the Historical Society, we have a member on the board, their activities are
They're sort of
pretty
Part,
clearly.
they're an extension of the town in their role there. Yeah.
The Health Association is clearly not.
Take it easy on them on the negotiations, I guess.
Just bringing it up
Yeah.
can create some heartburn, so.
Thank you.
So I would just say, Marcus, once again, you've done a great job. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
I appreciate
And,
that.
Thanks so much for coming up to meet with us.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. I appreciate it.
And I would say that the town has been very fortunate in its relationship with MMA, and whether it's Marcus or our risk, our loss control people, our risk management folks. They've been very willing to come and talk to, whether it's council or staff, so it's been good.
No, thank you very much. We definitely believe in what we do. I mean, it's all part of local government. It's that, that's why I was really excited about the democracy discussion that happened prior. That is what we are entirely passionate about and support. So it's all sort of connecting that inner loop. Anytime.
Try to get a little more excited for insurance.
Hey, that's okay. That's okay. It keeps me employed.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Appreciate you coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You all have a wonderful night.
Hey, my pleasure.
Is it appropriate to return to? Yeah, so let's go back to community development.
Okay. So item B, we've already heard about the community council potluck series follow-up and planning for the 11-4 event, the potluck. I already talked about the 36 kinds of chocolate chip cookies that we had, but Sarah, Sonia, do you want to, for us, I was
Yeah,
there, yeah,
and Rob was there too. Yep.
and we had a call out for illness and we're, you know. Pulling for you, we're pulling for you, man.
I'm
You
back
know,
on my feet. I didn't want to be coughing on anybody's cookie.
So what learnings, things we wanna improve upon, hats off to, I thought the town, I thought this facility was in great shape and ready for us, and so thank you for that, and I thought it was really well. I really appreciate how well the town did in terms of starting the sign, the Facebook posts, reminders, things like that. But a lot of good support.
Great inaugural event, and I'm passing people on the streets. Oh, that was great, guys. Hope you do it again. Like every first Sunday. Be there.
You know who wasn't there?
It's a call out.
First Sunday in November, 4:30. Yeah. But anything, these could be a good, like a theme for like these events, like what. The minutia and complication of insurance, right? And hosting their own events, it could be a good, you know, could be a good opportunity to.
That'll bring them in. Yeah, let's do it. Sure.
I know, but like a pager or, yeah.
Just a town event could be a great little
Yeah.
explainer
I was
kind of conversation.
Yeah,
Exact same thing,
no,
with a flyer.
we don't need to bring Marcus in for, you know, nope, but
The cheat sheet like version of that, the Cliff Notes version of that in the
Yeah.
very short thing. I did see, I took photos of the boards where people had put things they would like to see at future ones. And there were a lot of things like that, like updates on different community things and how to connect to them and how to access them. So I think a how to access thing, if we did it in a fun way, we can turn into a game even, you know, so we can do that, I think, in a way that would be fun and engaging and would help people feel like, I think you're right, there isn't a barrier, it sounds like, but if people perceive that there is, we need to help them perceive that there's not and how you get there. So I think that could be great.
big cut out of Megan.
Right.
So this is Megan and this is how you know,
Right.
she'll walk you through, because it strikes me, and I'm new to this, but it strikes me that the person, you know. I've been really impressed with Parks and Rec since, you know, I know there was conversations about, you know, how do people understand the value and the opportunity, and in my experience here, I've loved the visibility, I love that. All the different activities, and it's been impressive, so.
I do especially want to shout out Megan, because it was clear in the process of me liaising with the Orono Historical Society. Megan has clearly done some great work building relationship with them, maintaining, and helped take all of the items that Historical Society decided they wanted to display at the potluck and brought them to the Keith Anderson Center so that you know, our older Historical Society members didn't have to worry about schlepping all that stuff over there. It was super helpful. Made it possible for us to even get some people signing up to be interested in the Historical Society. So at least from my end, I was really pleased with the work staff did to make this event happen.
Worth noting that there was a raffle and a book was given away. I believe,
Yes.
Yep.
By the Historical Society.
Yeah, and if anyone's watching later and interested in the Historical Society, they are really a lot of fun. I had such a hoot when I went to their meeting and learned so much, and they have so much to share. So I hope we'll bring them back, because I saw on the note also that people would love to have more little historical snippets like every month, ideally. So a big shout out to them, and big shout out to community members who got organized to start a sign up for rideshare. If anyone does need a ride to the one in November, there are now community members willing to drive other community members. So that's not a council sponsored thing. That is happening from community members to community members, but we can get you in touch with those people. So if anyone needs a ride in November, numbers wise, we had approximately 65, I think, a little bit higher than that, and all ages from someone I think was under 6 months and oldest were probably over 80. So we had a good age spread. I think that's great. I had two things I flagged that would be important to think about before the November one. And they're not things we talk about in too much detail, I think, but we have a conversation coming up about mini grants. And I do think we really want to formalize that process and get it in place by the November potluck as a council, if at all possible, because there's interest and people are asking and they want to know like how to get to that. So I hope we as a council could prioritize that. And the other one was, I just wanted to check with Sophie about noticing the event. It was on the website under council potlucks, and that's good. We're noticed appropriately that way. Or does it need to be a council meeting also as a workshop or something? I'm just going to bounce that back to you, but just to be sure we do what we need to do there.
Yeah, I went back and forth with that, when you initially talked, you were thinking there would probably be two of you.
Right now, there's probably more of us.
Yeah, I probably will set it up as a meeting as well, but I probably won't post it all over the place, probably just post it online and here at town hall, which is two conspicuous places.
Great. I just wanted to be sure to break that part up. Those are my only two follow-ups, and the DIB committee has asked that they would like to host kind of the next one, kind of jointly with us. And I'm hoping council thinks that's a cool idea and we can empower them to take a leadership a bit on the November one to bring. Want to talk about that at all?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So our DEIB committee was interested in hosting their own kind of like back to school potluck or barbecue event. And then learned that we were doing this potluck series and was like, well, could we just partner on that? And so, yes, bringing that back around here for sort of a show of thumbs or discussion on that. But with all of your blessing, I'd love to go back and say, yes, you're invited to come table and help run an activity and kind of be a presence at the next one if folks feel like that would be good.
Yeah, would it be, can anybody do it? Could any group, or is it a group associated with the town? What would the thoughts be on that?
In terms of like,
highlight the groups associated with the town to start for me, like I'd like to see us, we had the Orono Historical Society, which has a connection with us, the EIB. I think we have a lot of town groups that people don't always know that much about, like if you're really into beautifying Orono, how do you get involved in that? You know, I'd love to highlight first anyway, ones that are sort of town affiliated, in my opinion, that's mine, but everyone else should talk. I'd like to bring those forward. But
Tree board, come talk about trees.
yeah, I think it'd be fun. The Trails Committee is affiliated with us in some ways and partners, you know, groups that really partner is my idea, of what I'd like to bring forth. That's what people have asked for. Like, can we learn more about this?
I do think that like, you know, going on, if we've sort of reach out to all of our town committees and have them as partners for this year, and then in future years want to keep doing this, and there are, and you know, the Little League or whomever else, like other groups in town that aren't town groups want to be partners on that, we could look at extending it in future. But I kind of like the idea of starting with town affiliated committees. That seems like a good starting place for connecting.
It seems like part of our purpose of doing this was trying to make ourselves more accessible to the community. I think making all the rest of town operations and different.
Get the
sort of-
planning board to come.
Yeah, like all of these places where people can learn more about how to take part in the processes that organize the town as such.
So
It makes a lot of sense.
if you keep it to things that the town is affiliated with, and I would argue the Orono VZ Little League, we have an ex officio seat on the board
Oh,
of
okay.
directors,
Great.
so we're part of the Little League and we donate money to the Little League. So I think if you do that, you're in a pretty safe place. I think the council really needs to be careful about opening things up for just anybody in the community, because then you're opening it up for anybody in the community. And it's easy to be thinking, this is what you have in mind. Somebody comes along and wants to table an event and they don't meet with that unless you sit down and very carefully construct a written policy that you're adopting that clearly denotes the purpose, the intent, what qualifies and what doesn't, then you are opening yourself and the town up for some pretty big controversy.
That's a good note of caution. That makes sense.
I think there's lots of groups that we have already to bring forth that are
Yeah.
affiliated. So I just would love to start there, and I agree with you, it could be problematic elsewise, so it seems like a place to start. How do you feel about that, Leo?
Yeah, that's,
Any-
I think that makes sense, and that was kind of the caution I was curious about.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
if it's open, it's open, or if it's, we're gonna try to bring it, I think that's a good idea.
Great. So is it all right if I circle back around to the DEIB committee and say, sure, we'd love to buddy with you on the next one? And then-
Circle around.
Great.
Speaking of the DEIB committee, I'm sorry to usurp time, but do we have an October meeting date?
Yes. Let me find that.
Anyway, thank you all. It was really fun doing that.
Thank you and
You guys
Tanya for your
did
leadership.
real pulling on
Thank
that.
you.
there.
I did make a list of a few supplies. It would be great to pick up for the next one and
Send them
I
to
can-
me and
I'll send
we'll
them.
go with
Great.
that. Yeah.
Can we move on to item C, the planning council committee conversation related to public safety services. Ready? I don't think we should do it. So I was the one who, I know I was a voice on this, and I think it makes sense to have a conversation part of a budget process, but I don't think I have the bandwidth to do something that's like a real process, it's a really valid process that has an engagement that is, so I apologize. I guess I'm ambitious about those kinds of things. I love the idea of bringing people together and creating awareness and having the community help us think through what public safety should mean. And that's something I would aspire to be able to do, but it feels like it's not, not the right time for that kind of thing. And maybe a more concerted discussion as part of the budget, maybe one department a year, but I just can't see doing something meaningful in the next couple months.
I think it's too important a topic to do it halfway,
Right.
Yeah,
So that's what I mean. Yeah.
And I'm comfortable delaying that conversation. I do think it's something that would be really wonderful and important to get into eventually, but I don't, feel attached to doing it right away this fall. Yep. And in answer to your earlier question, 6 p.m. on October 10th is our next DEIB committee meeting. To be so good as to reserve this space, or
So is that a week from tomorrow?
that is a week from tomorrow, yes.
I'm sorry, I'm breaking all of the meeting rules, but can you send me just an email with a quick
I will.
summary of what you want to cover?
I will.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any, if anyone wants me to eat a little more humble pie about having the idea, I'm happy to do that too, but anybody? I already ate all this cookies yesterday.
It's a really important conversation for us to have, but like Jeff said, I think it's too important not to give due diligence. I don't want to delay it forever. I think sometime in the spring.
Mhm.
I mean, I may or may not be here. We'll see. Same with Jeff, but yeah, I think right now this fall doesn't seem like we have the time. Yeah.
I appreciate keeping it on the agenda, and sorry if it created any like heartache or concern for staff. But so thank you. All right, that was C. And just town council community building mini grant program guidelines. So I drafted something, Sarah and I talked about it together, and I followed up. Definitely a draft, right? So no, please don't, things start with a draft, and happy to have a conversation about, how do we manage it on the back end? What kind of expectations can we create around getting it finalized so we can start communicating it? It's in the budget, we passed the budget 3 months ago. So it's, we want to get people, and we want to make it easy. I think that's, hopefully that's something we all agree we want to be able to do. I'm thinking, small denominations, 10s and 20s, but I know that's probably not what we're gonna be. We're gonna have to do a little something more than that, given the insurance discussion we just had, but so I don't know if people had a chance to look at it, ask Sophie to give us her thoughts on how to operationalize it. But my hope would be people email in an idea, we get them in front of this committee for a presentation, and then the next available council meeting, pop a vote, and then as soon as possible, get them the resources, but.
She put together, it's clear, simple, easy to understand. I am curious to hear from Sophie if there's any potential problems that's presented, and then I'm interested to get into the weeds of making this possible, figure out what back end stuff we need to do.
For me, what I want to make sure is that the program has enough sort of institutional, I don't know what it is, that it has enough boundaries and enough sort of clear guidelines that 5 years from now, when the council may look completely different, it's still delivering a good product. So like what I need is to know, like, okay, what are our priorities when we're assessing a grant application? Like what's our rubric? What do we hope an outcome is going to be? And how do we discriminate between, if we're opening this up to the world, what guidelines do we have in place so that if a person comes with an idea that we don't feel is in keeping with the character of our community, we have some backing. It's not completely subjective in opening us up to either funding something we really don't want to fund or opening us up to some kind of liability. So I before I give away somebody else's money, like I want to make sure like I'm doing it the right way.
Yeah. No, it's, those are important concerns. I mean, it is not the 7 of us, you know, you didn't even vote on it because you weren't here. So the 6 of us, you know, next time. But, you know, it's not our money to give away. So we have to be, I can totally understand that. And then what criteria? I could totally see that. Someone wants to start a, you know, some kind of, I won't even say it.
Yeah, I mean, we all imagine worst case scenario.
Yeah, no, that's exactly where my head went. Kind of, you know.
That was my kind of question.
Yeah.
I love simple, easy for sure. So I like that whole theme. It's a lot easier when I'm acting as me, as,
Right.
you know. Leo.
Yeah.
If someone comes to my business, wants me to sponsor something or something like that, that's easy. I can just make a decision, but criteria, I think we probably need to bake out a little more to Jeff's point exactly.
I just have to point out that this isn't. We can't get away from it being subjective because we have to vote on it. If this is something that just runs on its own without us voting on it.
Oh, no,
Then
think
we can make as much rubrics as we want to go up the yin yang, but in the end, it's like we're voting on this, so how can we not have it be sort of subjective? But your point is well taken, because we're not gonna be here forever, and I guess the goals have to be a little bit clear and maybe taking some things out of the vote, but if we have to, if this is something that it's like first come, first serve, then we can make it as like automatic as possible. But if we have to vote on this, then there's no way it's not gonna be subjective, because we're all 7 of us have totally different ideas of what we want to promote in some ways. And I would hope we could come to a pretty good consensus, but I could very well see us as a council disagreeing on this thing, and I don't think that's a problem.
No, I think my fear is we could have a great event, a community yard sale that's the money is going to go to charity. We could have that event sponsored by a really ugly group. And I would not want to fund what could be a good event, you know? But if we don't have something in place to say, you know, right, like the groups or individuals that we want this funding to go to have this community purpose, however we articulate that, then how do we say no to, you know?
4 of us vote no, and it doesn't get funded.
Well,
No,
okay.
we open ourselves up to some kind of liability. I mean, that seems to be like a big portion of the discussion tonight, on all these different topics.
I know, it's hard. I get it.
It's hard.
If I could maybe help frame this a little bit differently, maybe. So from a staff perspective, mini grant program seems like a great idea. And our job is to support what council wants. You need to remember that you're a governmental entity, which means you have an obligation to ensure compliance with the constitutional right of free speech. And speech has been defined in so many different ways. We keep getting caught up as I try to create a government speech policy that would allow you to allow residents to decide what kind of flags to put up, or because ultimately, if you open things up to residents on a basis of first come, first serve, it doesn't matter who arrives, you can't make the decision based on what they're saying, right? So I would see things as simple as, from a policy standpoint, a written policy that actually functions as guidelines for this mini grant process that talks about the intent of the program. If you're looking for things that are promote inclusion, community spirit, diversity, welcomes diverse opinions, there is language that you can pull from that would give you some amount of protection. I also think that, well, stop there.
I was just wondering, I was imagining that in some ways there's kind of an analogous thing happening here to what we were just talking about, where someone comes to Parks and Rec with a great idea for a project. And so I'm curious if there's an existing framework within Parks and Rec that we could maybe borrow some language from, because this is a wheel that doesn't need to be fully reinvented.
So I think it's a wheel that might not need
Yeah.
to be fully reinvented. I also think that the pieces that staff can't
Mhm.
invent or change for you are, what are your goals?
Yeah.
What is it that you're trying to fund? I need you guys to answer that, and then I can come back with draft language. But I think we also need to look at things like, these are public funds. While I get wanting to follow up with a counselor who is passionate about this, these really need to be a standardized application. We can make it as simple as we can make it, but everything that I've seen with looking at getting public funds, it's a standard application to do it. Everybody has to provide the same information. I would think understanding what the budget for the event is would be really important. And what is it we're trying to fund? Well, I get that we'll fund anything. There are some things we can't fund on here. Like, we can't fund political activity. I'm not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
We can't fund alcohol because the council's told me I can't do that. There are things that we absolutely can't fund. So a standardized application, once that application comes in, it is part of a public record. Not just it's a record that you hold in your possession as a public record, but it is part of the public record, which means that it really needs to be here and available to the public to see. So I would, if you want to put stuff on here about a primary counselor to contact, to talk about it, to walk you through it, to sit down and fill it out for you, with you, I think that's perfectly fine. But I do think we can create a simple application that we could have a couple of counselors that would be willing to do the legwork. I think that's an awesome idea.
Okay, that's helpful, guys.
No, I
Thank you
think
very
that's really helpful.
That's real.
And my final one, I'm still trying to work around, and I haven't quite got there yet. It is the idea that you're gonna fund an event and we're just gonna give you money. I get that if somebody wants to put on that community yard sale and they want to hire some kind of an entertainer to provide entertainment while it's happening, and that's $350 and they don't have it, giving them a check for $350 flies in the face of all of our internal controls. I would say at minimum, we might want to do this like your FSA or your, like, here's the bill. I've got the bill or the quote, I'm giving it to you, and what you need to do, I give you the money, but then you've got to provide me proof that you actually spent the money that way.
Yeah.
So I get that I can't put the regular internal controls in, but we've got to have some sort of internal controls. And maybe if it's over a certain dollar amount, you give the town the bill and the town just pays the bill directly, would be another option that we might have. But there's got to be some kind of internal control mechanism.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, those were my questions, was about how we would do the reimbursement and
Yeah.
whether people, would have to pay first and get reimbursed, or if there would be a way for the town to pay directly if costs were high, or if it was prohibitive for the person to do that. So that would be great. And I fully agreed with your comments earlier. What I was sort of hoping, I think as far as like the goal from council is to build a sense of community in town. Like, we all seem to have that clear consensus that we want these to go for something that we believe is building a sense of community. But I think we also need what sort of talking about, in a statement. I don't even think that has to be about the goal of the grant. It can be a statement about all Orono town events must, right? All grant funded events must be diverse and inclusive and welcoming of all people, and not include alcohol, and whatever the other one was, not be political in nature, right? Just as a clear statement, like, these are things you must do,
Yeah.
right? I think is what's needed. And then if you meet all those criteria, and then you bring us an idea that you think would build a sense of community in town, then we'll take a look at that, right? And that's what I would like to see. And it sounds like Sophie already has language probably about that works for Parks and Rec. So I think that would be great.
Yeah, I think that satisfies a lot of my concerns is that I don't want. And what I think is gonna be a great program actually to be co-opted by, somebody who
Sure.
really doesn't have that vision for it.
She's like, yeah.
And I-
Like the worst possible Facebook group in the world. Coming in.
And I don't think that we've said first come, first serve. I mean, we've said there is an application and, I love that. I totally think it needs to be standardized. I just want it to be really short. So, I mean, I think the goal is, basic info about who you are, short paragraph about what your idea is, short budget and not more than that, because people are asking for a very small amount of money. And to ask people to go through a lot of
How
hoops
much-
will like, yeah.
How much money, and this is an honest question, like, can somebody come in and ask for the full 10 grand? I mean,
That'd be a really good idea.
yeah, I mean, or are we envisioning this is a $500 grant, 250 is, and then we parcel it out in that way?
Well, I think we said on here, I mean, this is just one idea, but we said preference for things that were under 1,000, because I think what we were thinking was if somebody comes in with a bigger number idea, we'd probably say, well, hold, not yet. But if we get to the end of the year and they still want to do that idea and nobody else has wanted the money, then I would be open to considering that. That's me personally, but I don't know where the rest of you are at, I don't know if I'd go 10,000, but I'd certainly be willing to consider, more if there's money in the pot and it seems like a great idea. That's just me.
Chair recognizes town manager, so if he wants to go.
So I think too that would you require all the grant recipient to provide information to the town to promote their event as part of the requirement, so that we know it's not, I want to put on a party, a community party, but really it's, I want my friends and I don't have money for the food, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would also say, I think it needs to be ADA compliant.
Yeah, put it on that list. I mean, make that list, Sophie, of everything that needs to be there. I think that's just crucial and that has to be there. I don't know what other people feel about a mouse. Does everybody want them all under 1,000, all under 2,000? What do other people feel?
I'm agnostic to it. I just think a great idea is a great idea, but
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was some.
Yeah, and people have different, it's that one piece of equipment or something, or, it's gonna put them over there, help them build capacity. I'd love it to be things that people are trying to start, that might be something that goes on.
What I liked on here about process, I would say, Sophie, I really liked what you said about it needs to come to the town and needs to be kept on record. That all makes total sense to me. I would only hope that one of us or more is a contact just for people to help them get through the process. But I do think that this is important about, Dan wrote, applicants would be invited to the next community development committee for a very brief informal conversation, or they could schedule a one-on-one discussion with a counselor. And I think that's important because for some people, coming to the meeting would be a big barrier. Like either they just can't arrange that in their work lives, or they're really shy and don't want to do that for whatever it is. And I don't know if one counselor is the right way, maybe there's a different way, but I do want there to be a different option for folks who are not able to come to a committee meeting, but could meet with either one or two counselors and explain their idea and trust those counselors to go represent it to the rest of the council. So I guess I want to follow up on that. That was, Dan wrote it. I wasn't part of that, but I liked something that gave people an option if coming to the committee meeting isn't possible for them.
Seems sensible to me.
So I would just say that we run into this a lot, like with poverty abatements, where there's an application. They meet with staff, because that's what poverty abatements are different. And they can choose whether or not to come to meet with council. Sometimes they want to, sometimes they don't want to, or they can't. If the thing that I tell them is I will carry the water for you at the meeting, but you have to understand I'm not you. And so the information that you put on your application should give a really clear understanding, and maybe we don't even require that they meet with a town councilor, but rather say your application will be considered at the next community development committee meeting. And then when those applications come in, we can encourage them to either give them the date of the meeting or to reach out to one of the two counselors or three counselors that want to do that And that way, when the application comes up, they'll either be here to defend it or speak to it and, or a counselor will have heard it and can speak to it. Or you make it on the merit of what you've seen.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
sounds
that
good.
works.
Can also participate, and promote
Yep.
too, so.
Yeah. But I think that should be their choice. I think that's great. I just want people to have choices and not
Yeah.
have it be like there's only one way.
We're messing up Dan's one pager a little bit.
I bet not. I bet it's not gonna get that.
So in terms of-
Front and back.
Dan's gonna fit it on one page and then there's gonna be a different one pager.
Yeah.
That's actually the application.
Yeah.
Don't you think? It'd be two one.
I think so
pages,
too,
right?
yeah. I think just like,
Yeah.
just like with insurance stuff, I mean, I bet we can get
Me too.
something cool, it's one page, and then.
Two one pages. We can do it.
Yeah, okay, so what, how do we, Sophie, how do you want to proceed next? You want,
So, you wanna move this along quickly. I would suggest that it does not take a full formal council vote to agree to something, guidelines. I think that can happen as committee. Are you all right with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's an awful quick turnaround. Oh, wait, we've got all next week. So on the 16th, what I can have, well, 16th is a regular council meeting. What I can have at that point is not the one pager for Dan, but I can have guidelines and an application out to you in advance of that. We could go the formal route and put an order on if folks want to go that route, or I can have it out to you and we can talk about it on the 23rd in committee and make any changes and not formally adopt it. Those would be kind of the two avenues. I don't think we would put something on a council. You already have potentially 2 executive sessions and a workshop.
On the 16th.
Yeah, and one of those workshops is staffing and I need some.
So can you bring us something on the 16th of what you said you could bring the
I can bring
guidelines
it.
and the application, and then
just
if
look
we
at it.
absolutely love it, can we just make a motion then to vote on it? And if not, we'll just punt it to the 23rd and finalize it then, or is?
So to make a motion to vote on it, you'd have to put an order.
But it
on
doesn't require a vote, right? So
But
we
it
could
doesn't
just,
require. a
so we could just talk about it on the 16th and talk about it
But
again on the
we won't-
23rd. and
Yeah,
be
but
done.
we won't have time.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't have talking time.
Got it. So we won't talk. We'll just look and then we'll talk on the
So
23rd.
what I can do is have it for you by the 16th. And then we could talk about it on the.
I think that'd be excellent.
It works for me
Yeah.
and we don't leave on the 23rd,
until it's done.
until it's-
so book some time.
Brings-
Third, maybe here. Yeah, we're gonna get it done.
You're not supposed to harass.
I love here at every meeting. The public has spoken, you know, love it. Sorry. Is that it for me? I mean, have you heard enough? Was there anything else? Is
Great, thank you, Sophie.
that the last? Thank you.
All right.
Good work.
Good.
Okay,
One more
back to
item on
Finance and Operations Committee.
Finance and Operations process, finalizing of the town council work plan and priorities. So I'll just go ahead and let you set this up, Sophie.
So the reason this is on here is because I look at my list. And that's something that we had a workshop for. We punted, that got tabled because of the late hour. So it's my job to say, okay, folks, how do we wanna, oh, wait, no, wait, that's the next thing. That's the, we had a workshop. Things kind of have dropped and other things have taken precedent on the work plan and priorities. I was thinking about the manual, which is back on the agenda at some
Getting
point.
like me now.
I know,
On
it's too much
plans.
stuff in my head.
There's too much stuff.
So what I need as your staff is some direction on how we're gonna pick the work plan and priorities back up. I think we had talked about trying to get some pillar language out. I also think if we're gonna put that effort in, we've got to be able to schedule time. And one of the things we're running out of very quickly is I'm already filling up meetings in November and December. So what I don't want to do is pull all of that stuff back out, start working on it, and then from a priority standpoint, is the manual more important or is the priorities more important to the council.
Just to clarify, the name of the document, council planning document, October through December, is that what we're talking about here?
No, this is,
Way back, yeah.
this is the high level work plan that council wanted to adopt, where we were kind of shifting from a task-based work plan to big ideas, cultural shift, and priorities with some effort under those priorities.
This is in the folder called FY24 Work Plan and Priorities, correct?
And Dan, did you actually start some
Well,
drafts of,
Again, of looking at the wrong document, so we just following the sword.
Yeah, we could,
you started a draft beyond that never came back to us. Do you have something you could share out with the rest of us? And could we schedule potentially then a time to talk about that? You took notes and you were gonna, as I recall, right, put that in a draft to come back to us?
yeah, I did, and I worked on it, and I go back and see where the status is of it now, because we,
I just think it would be great to look at, I know you took those notes and you did some steps after. I remember you telling me the next week, and I feel like it would be great. For me, I'd like to finish it. I mean, I feel like it's important, and I think it's like important for staff that we do it.
So
So I would like to, if we have to schedule another workshop on a different day of the week, I'll show up to do it. I mean, I think we should do it.
for me, not wanting to talk about the manual. And what I want to prioritize the right thing in our agenda planning. So I honestly don't have a preference, but I would like to leave tonight knowing which one is the priority for council. And that's the one we'll schedule first. And that still may take us to December before we get to it.
Do we have 3 things pending? Because I feel like we have the work plan, the internal controls manual, and the policy and procedures manual for council. So I feel like there's 3 pending. Is that
The-
correct?
Internal controls manual is on its own track, and that one kind of got pushed ahead. And so that's finding a way into the agenda all on its own.
That
That's,
will come back to us because there were some unresolved issues. Okay, so that one's coming back to us already.
Yep.
So all we're wondering about is
The policy.
policy and procedures manual versus the
Because
council. work plan.
these are the two things that are essentially council generated.
Yep.
And so since we're generating the work, we should prioritize the work. I think.
yeah.
Agreed.
does it make
So-
sense? Go ahead if you want.
What drive and what's the name of it?
If you go into the town council drive and type in the search bar work plan, you should come up with a
Not
couple.
under policies, manuals, guide.
no,
No,
So 2024 work plan and priorities documents.
Mine's FY24 work
Yeah.
plan. and priority.
That folder, and we're at the council planning and priorities workshop, not the notes, but the. I see the council planning and priorities workshop, 6/26/23. The workshop on best practices and goal settings. That's not the right stuff, right?
no, there was one after that.
There was
And then service promise and message
promise
bills.
and message pillars brainstorm.
there it is.
What date is that one?
It says it was last modified July 24. There are 3.
Okay, so you want us to Google service promise?
It was something that's just.
In some ways, one of these two items is a little bit more abstract, a little bit more like about what values we're trying to legislate with. And then the policies and procedures manual is, I think, the more details oriented one, which will be informed by having the other conversation first. So that creates sort of, in my mind already, if not an actual like gradation of importance, at least a chronological priority.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think it makes sense to do the bigger picture first and then to finish the policy and procedures manual up.
Okay.
Sounds fine to me.
All right.
Now you're at that.
Sophie, is that?
Do we all feel like if we need to add a workshop on a different day to do it, we'll do that? Because Sophie sounds like it's hard to fit things in. I'm fine with that. Is anyone else fine with that or not?
I'm fine doing another workshop, like, I don't wanna, I don't know, I love just having the Mondays and then knowing I'm good until the next Monday. But I mean, is there a way that some of us could get together and not by email or, I don't know.
I'm fine adding another day. My schedule in the week is pretty tight in October, but after this month, have a little bit more flexibility and knowing how packed our meetings are upcoming. The foreseeable future, I think. it sort
Yeah,
of
I
makes
mean,
sense
we
for us to-
we may have to. And I mean, we did express a preference not to have unannounced, council meeting, emergency council meetings to the extent that we don't. So, I'm mindful of that. I don't want to add things into our schedule that we haven't pre-planned for, but if we have to,
And we would announce it. I mean, it wouldn't be unannounced. It would just maybe not be. in a
I didn't
plan.
mean unannounced in a formal way. I meant it wasn't in our original plan.
Someone has to staff it too, so it's.
I'd vote for sticking with Mondays, to be honest, just because I've got things coming up here in this next work wise that aren't.
I mean, if possible.
Me having 2 nights.
Jeff and I get up really early, you guys, so that's kind
Honestly, early morning does work for me.
I could do it.
I would do it, but only for democracy.
Yeah.
Just looking at Matt's.
Oh,
face, and I'm
So
gonna
how far-
suggest-
I'm up. I just have kids that I feel.
How far out are you looking, Sophie, in order to get it on a Monday, just out of curiosity? I mean, I'm fine with that, but I also don't want it to be like, we're not gonna get to
So-
it till December.
On the 23rd, I had a workshop on the policy and procedures manual of revision. So that's part of the reason I asked. 'cause
Of
we can
October?
just- Yeah,
Yeah, so we could do this one in October and then we can fund policy and procedures till November or early December.
so the way you guys like to talk, I would suggest we would do this one in October. Probably review it again in late, mid-November. I'm just trying to be realistic and I don't know that we brought big picture ideas, things in pieces and had you get from pieces to final.
I feel like this is our third discussion and I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I feel ready to like concretize this and be done, man. But are the rest of you not there? This is our third discussion. Yeah, I mean, I feel ready to like put the language there. If Dan sends a draft around and we look at it ahead of time and come in, I would love to come in with a goal and get it done. But
try and finish it on.
For the policies and procedures manual, or no, for the.
for the- I mean, it's our third discussion on it. I feel like the third one we could do it, but
Yeah, I don't want to belabor points, but
I guess my point was I wouldn't plan on what's gonna happen next
until we know. Yeah, makes good sense.
That makes sense. It's a
Think
good
so.
caution.
You can always move up policies, procedures to the next one. If we're planning to have multiple here and we get this done, then we could just slide the other one into the slot.
Are we able to come like at 4:30 on a Monday? Give us an extra, you can't.
occasionally I can,
This is the only
but
day
not
that I can't.
regularly I can.
Legally, we're not supposed to even start till 7.
No, we have a legal vote on
I know
that
we
at
do. I
every
know we
single
do.
council meeting, Dan. Sophie puts it carefully on. I never miss it. Nancy gets it on there. It's always there.
I know, just giving that a hard time.
Yeah,
Trying to
agree.
lay off
So,
public.
yes.
So,
All right, I feel like I have direction.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
You all set with finance and operations? All right, Council Chair, Town Manager updates. I have one thing. Dan and I were able to attend the Caribou Bog Recreation Center grand opening. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. It was awesome.
yeah, best speech. I mean, the perfect amount of time, perfect sentiment. And then
Applause.
we heard more from more people after that. I'll leave it at
It was great. It's an awesome. place.
Very supportive. It was excellent. Yeah.
And I heard they had most barbecue.
Those barbecue was there. Mason's Brewery was there. And Abe Firth was there, so it was kind of weird for me, having drinking a beer from Marsh Island. I was having a Marsh Island beer, talking to you. I felt awkward about it, but
So this was not a town council event.
I don't want to get into it.
No,
We are noting.
Yeah.
That was it.
okay, so I have a few things. First, I just want to recognize that this is Nancy's last meeting.
Oh,
Town.
thank you, Nancy.
So 30 years of dedicated municipal service, the last 22 year, she will be departing. We're still working on her job description because when we pulled it out, we discovered that while a lot of it is somewhat accurate, the next person isn't going to be doing the same job. So we're hoping to get that up, and she doesn't realize that I'm not deleting her cell phone. And I will just say, because Nancy's been incredibly kind in her departure and what it is like to work here, but I can't tell you how many times Nancy has truly functioned as the heart of our staff, and she is incredible, talented, wonderful. So
Congratulations.
that is what's keeping me awake at night. The other thing is, just wanted to let you know that the planning board reviewed the housing ordinance, the changes to the ordinance that the council was proposing to comply with LD 2003, which is affordable housing related. The only suggestion that they are recommending is has to do with ownership of the lots, which is already dealt with in the ordinance in other ways. So we would suggest that we not overcomplicate these changes with that. What I would like to know is, would you be all right with us going ahead and calling the public hearing on this in October for November? That way it can get adopted in December and be valid.
Yeah, I'm ready for this process to get through. We've
Okay.
been talking about this one for a while now.
Yeah, well, welcome to local government. The last thing I will say, our police department, our fire department has been running an awful lot of calls. Some of which have some public information out there on, and I will just tell you that Vogler Library is still standing. It was simply an electrical, an issue with one of the electrical fixtures. None of the collection was damaged. So I know that there's telephone, the telephone game happened, that one. The other thing I would like to just quickly go through with council is I had sent an email to the council chair about the planning board. So for the first time in my 12 years here, an action of the planning board has been appealed at Superior Court. It's called an 80B action. We have a very limited time to file a response. And so the town's response is always to file a response. And then we kind of pick up the pieces after that to figure out what needs to happen. So when this is an appeal of a permit that was issued for 19 College Heights and the Bangor Natural Gas Regulator Station. So the first thing I did,
In college.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking college app, not College Heights. Could be interesting. So as I do anytime something like this comes in, before even asking somebody to defend the town, I asked our attorney to look at the record of the application and the process that the planning board went through to see if there's a problem, because if there's a problem, I would want to fix it and not wait for a ton of time, because this is not an easy thing to get through the courts. It takes time. So we did the review and in our attorneys, we used Roger Huber for this work. So in our attorney's opinion, this was a very well done and well documented permit review approval. I spoke with him. The town is not obligated to defend the planning board decision. However, and I'm going to underline however twice, you impaneled a board to make a decision based on the rules. And so this is a group of volunteers that you've asked to do work. In Roger's opinion, when towns back out of supporting their planning board decisions, it sends a really bad message to those volunteers. And I would really hate to do that. So when we think about the review, I think it's important for you to understand this is not a de novo review, meaning it's not like the judge is gonna open this up and look at everything from soup to nuts and see if they arrive at the exact same place that the planning board did. This is a review. The judge is gonna be looking to see if there is any evidence in the record to support the planning board decision. The judge is going to look to see if the planning board committed an error of law. And they're gonna see if the planning board abused its discretion. So this is a very narrow review, and essentially what the court system says in these types of actions is it assumes that the body was working with good faith and all of those things until you can prove that it didn't. So these are actions that are hard to overturn. I talked with the town attorney prior to, I don't know, 10 months ago, 8 months ago. I would have simply moved this through without doing anything other than notifying the council, but knowing that council wants to talk about this. We talked about strategy, and my strategy would be to have Bangor Natural Gas pick up as much of the defense of this as humanly possible. But even without that, he estimates that this will, I use the $5,000 mark as my authority. And he said, we won't even come close to it, even if Bangor Natural Gas wasn't part of this. So this shouldn't be a very expensive defense. So that's where we are.
Appreciate you coming to us like that. I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't want Jeff here.
Oh, no, go right ahead.
I think clearly there are some neighbors or butters who are frustrated by it, and I don't know how many, do we know how many people signed on to it? Okay.
Yeah, I've got it on my desk. I think there are 4.
And I think we gotta defend the process that we, I mean, I think the town. I think I think we could always talk about improving process and having people, more people, how we get more awareness around these things. But to the extent that the rules were the rules when we went through it, and if we feel strongly that. Like again, vibes of trying to make everybody happy, that just it's not always gonna work here, so.
I have full faith that our planning board.
Yeah.
Was thorough and. Followed all the rules. And so for me, I have no problem recommending that. We continue to, we support our volunteers, we support the planning board. That said, if this project was in my backyard, I'd be upset. And so maybe. In our long-term planning, and maybe this is part of our. Our 10-year planning, that when we look at what is zoned in each region and things like that, maybe that's the time that we.
Yep.
Take a look at these processes, but I have no appetite for not supporting them.
I like that the concerned neighbors have an opportunity in a very, very prescribed, very legal way. If the town did, that's where it's gonna come out, and I like that people have an opportunity to go to higher legal authority and be heard. I don't like that, they're not happy, but I like that they're able to be heard, and I think, we have to do our part as the convener of the planning board and to, the process that exists and support, so.
I mean, how can we not? What's the word? People that we put there, if they did it correctly.
I'm sure
That's
the
not-
board did the job that
Yeah.
they were there to do. I also really understand the frustration of the
Yeah.
neighbors, as Adrian was pointing out. I mean, I'm really upset about it too. And I'm sure that they're frustrated that it turned out that the local government was not the place where they could have any kind of appeal on this process.
And I have a question too. Do we already have access to whatever their, or will we at some point to whatever their complaints actually were, not in terms of relitigating anything about what planning board did or questioning them, but just in terms of our own future process about what parts felt frustrating to the public? I would want to at some point see what their, complaints were about the process, even though perhaps rules were followed, we might want to look at in the future.
They've shared that with us.
So we have that in detail
So-
yet or not? I haven't seen it.
I've given you everything we have.
Okay, but will we at some point
And-
see that?
It depends. It really depends. So there is a rumor out there that they filed for, I hadn't even heard the term, but a motion on the facts, a trial on the facts, a motion for a trial on the facts. And, under that, they'd have to give specific things that they're alleging. But right now, all they say is that it was arbitrary and we violated the law. And that's all they have to say to bring this action forward. Ultimately, it's my understanding, if it's not, well, it's my understanding that these types of actions are usually briefed by each side. And then those briefs go to the judge and the judge makes a finding. And so when briefs get filed, they would become of the record and I could share those. I will say my intent would be to, again, let Bangor Natural Gas defend its own project. But I do want to just caution you, we try really hard at the municipal level to be kind and wonderful and warm to people, even when they come forward to critique us or to say we didn't do something right. When you're in the legal process, in order to preserve certain rights and not knowing what they're saying, there are going to be things that we're going to say like, these people, some of these, we're reserving our right that some of these people might not have standing. Now, do I think a resident near a project should have the ability to bring their concerns forward? Absolutely. Under the law, you have to have standing, and we have a very short amount of time to finalize our response. So I think just to understand, when you put things into a legal context, there are legal answers that have to be done. And everybody at this point, just like they didn't put a lot of detail in there so that they could preserve the right to complain, tell the judge about anything, we are going to try to preserve all of our rights as well.
My only request is if there are filings that you just forward them on for us to see them.
When I have them,
Yeah.
because what I'm hearing is things might be being filed that I don't have.
Sure.
Do we owe neighbors an email back? We've gotten correspondence. I know that I was deferential to saying anything other than, I'm inclined to respond to an email like, thank you for reaching out to me. But do we owe them a meeting? Is there
I'm not sure that,
the request?
I'm not sure that, and this is just me talking, because I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure that now that the process has been initiated, any meeting that we would have would be,
Future focused or?
yeah, I mean, and it would be extrajudiciary, and I just don't know what the proper thing to do.
So I've always been taught that while something is subject to appeal, nobody should be talking about it, even if it's a wing of your, it's the planning board thing. I would even halt discussion about changes that are truly within your purview to do, but I would halt that until the appeal period is over, until this is over.
Okay.
Is there, what is the length of the appeal period?
Well,
Or
they-
can it go indefinitely?
Well, it goes now until the judge makes a decision or somebody withdraws. And I don't think you're gonna see Bangor Natural Gas withdraw.
Anything else from your manager's report?
I got lots, but nothing.
Okay. Can we just, I know I ask this a lot, but then the Forest Avenue thing, can we get a letter out to the neighbors again if we don't think we're gonna get it built this? I feel like they heard from us once, and I don't feel like they've heard from us in terms of since the delay, and it's been about 6 weeks or so, I think. And
So I've had personal conversation with the organizers, both of them, that brought the Forest Ave
Yeah.
group together. I am waiting for Rob, and I think I've communicated this at least on one occasion, that I'm waiting for Rob to get the final plan from Sewell. When that happens, Rob's plan is to still do the work. We can do that right up until the plant closes, which Rob thinks we won't run into for at least a few more weeks. So the goal here is to give good information.
Right.
Not just information.
yeah, but I don't think, the problem is, I just don't feel like the two organizers are empowered or prepared to notify everybody who, I mean, everyone got a letter, everyone wants it done, everyone, so it feels like.
So do you want me to send a letter that says we're working on this and it may, and we think it's gonna get done and we should know in 2 weeks, but we'll tell you in 2 weeks?
I would like that.
I would not like that.
Yeah.
I think that's overkill. I mean, you can tune into the meeting, obviously, and watch what's going on.
How many
because
people you think are watching this?
I don't know.
You know, I
Send
mean,
a word.
Yeah.
I mean, sending a formalized letter to say we don't know seems a little silly to me.
Do we, I'm a little out of the loop, I think, on the details of this. When were folks on Forest Ave last in receipt of a letter from us on this? How long ago?
Was end of August. It was right when I left, I want to say, and it said our goal is to get this done by this construction season, I think. Which our goal is still to get this done by the end of this construction season.
It's only been about a month. I mean, kind of agree with Leo, I think, on this one.
I just have one other question. Is there a compromise? Is there a compromise position of just putting something on the website that says, Forest Ave update and just keep it
done that.
updated on there?
It was August 8th, 2023. Traffic calming measure, installation speed tables. Public Works will begin this project in August. So that was 2 months ago. It's now October. And that's the last that people heard from the town of Orono on this project. And I think I'm okay with, I accept that there are, construction challenges, things like that unforeseen. But I don't understand why we wouldn't want to do the same, give them more feedback, but we told them it would begin in August, and now they're watching people drive up and down their street at 50 miles an hour.
If that is the last thing that they heard, then
Yeah, that seems.
I'm sorry, Leo, I might be. back over this way.
That's just been my question. That's been,
I think if it specifically said it would start by a time and we're more than a month past that, that probably does deserve an update.
Yeah.
And it went out on Facebook that it had been delayed, that we had to get someone in to stamp it because residents had questions and concerns about the plan.
Mhm.
So, if you want to put my fear, and I'll do what council wants, of course, but my fear here is everybody right now has Rob Yerkes's number on that letter and his email address. Every time we send a letter like that out, it generates people oftentimes especially when it gets posted on the website and social media. So it's not just a communication with that group. It generates questions, inquiries from people from all over town. And now staff who is working really hard to try to get the work done before this construction season is over is now taking time to field a bunch of calls that didn't rise to the level before they got the concern, the letter. And I don't know how many people Rob has talked with, but I can tell you I have a sense of his workload. And we're also trying to roll out the trash change. And, like I said, it's not about writing a letter that says we'll get back to you. We hope we'll get it done by the end of this year. It's about what that generates.
And I think it would be reasonable if we end up missing the window for this season to send a letter saying, updating. But I mean, I drive my bike on Grove Street. I'm not sure what's going on up there. And I just think that's a bad precedent to be, if you hire someone to do your driveway and they're not showing up, obviously they have to communicate with you. But this, Public Works has enough going on that sending out formalized letters for a status update that's not even really a status update.
No, we
It's
told them
excessive.
we would do the project in August. It's now October and I don't want to fight with you about it. My ask would be to do it. I'm one person on this council.
So
That's not what we're gonna do. That's not what we're gonna do, but
if we're
I'd
gonna
be
do
disappointed if we
it,
don't.
if we're gonna do it, can we agree that it's not gonna get posted for the world to then want to call for updates on all of their streets
Yeah,
and
so just to the foreign staff neighborhood involved. I would support sending a status update just to those.
And that's
When do
by
we
letter.
expect Sewell, when is the last date Sewell will get back to us?
So Rob thought he would have it by the end of last week. I was out of town at the end of last week and we have not connected, so I don't know if he has it yet or not. But I know this is a priority. I also know that vendors don't do a lot of municipal work in the middle of the season because they're getting the big expensive state jobs. And they push the plant not closing for as late into the season as they can. We were paving in November last year.
What I'm wondering is if we expect an update from Sewell, which we should notice the Forest Ave residents about when we get it. Whether before we send this notice, maybe we can
Makes a lot of sense.
double check and. Is that,
I'd like to see something go out this week, if we could do that, and I don't like the idea that I've got to say I won't agree to put it on social media, as as an elected official. I'm not gonna do that.
Who just. With our short staff, I'm curious who is responsible. Is this Nancy?
No.
Would Nancy typically do something like this?
No, This is me.
Okay, this is,
How many people are we talking on this letter list? Maybe is this, who
Oh.
doesn't, is it? 200?
No, I want to say, was it 90?
Yeah,
Something, 90 something.
and we have what, 3
So-
weeks left, the window possibly of like 3 or 4 weeks. So if we'll send this out, we don't know, we're not sure, we're shooting for this. And then again, in 3 or 4 weeks, we're gonna send another 90 letters out to these people to say, hey, we missed the window that's closed.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You know
I
what?
think-
They're afraid in their streets for the kids across the streets, and I think they should get that kind of level of support from their town.
I think the issue is also that.
I do, I feel that way.
Excellent.
But I do think the issue is we said we would do something, and I think anytime we say we're gonna do something and we don't, it deserves a follow-up. So if with letter had said something different that was vaguer, like it will happen this construction season, I would feel differently. But if our letter said we would begin by the end of August and we are now in October, I also agree that a letter should go to indicate that. And hopefully, if we do that as a practice over time, maybe a little less requests and less comments would come back to staff because people will assume that a new letter will come as soon as there's an update. But, for now, for me, if we made a promise, I'd like to follow. it. That's me.
Promise about
I
the
mean,
timeline.
Just one
So,
person. So
At this point, I will just do it. I really wish, though, that, well, it doesn't matter what I wish.
Can I just ask that before we send a letter that says we don't know what we're doing, that we give Sophie enough time to touch base with Rob and Rob enough time to touch base with Sewell, so that we're not sending out 1,000 letters updating, every 2 days.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else? Is there any public comment?
I mean, not here.
Okay. All right, then seeing nothing else, we will adjourn our